Chapter 1970. If Ling Han and the others were here, they would definitely discover that Ji Wuming's current aura was slightly different from before. His whole person exuded a demonic aura, but it did not make others feel uncomfortable. And he tilted his head slightly. Someone else has come, but it seems like he will not be easy to deal with. Xiao. He had not finished speaking when a short man suddenly appeared. His face was covered in wrinkles, and it was as if he would collapse at any moment. Tang Minglong. We should have met before, right? Tang Minglong stared at Ji Wuming. Ji Wuming broke into a smile. Didn't you introduce yourself at the entrance of the valley a few months ago? Tang Minglong shook his head. A little earlier. Ji Wuming also shook his head. This is my first time coming to the Calm Peace Heaven, so it should be impossible. Tang Minglong stared into Ji Wuming's eyes and calmly said, I am not talking about this life of yours. The smile on Ji Wuming's face immediately disappeared, and he also stared at Tang Minglong. The two of them just stared at each other, and neither spoke. You give me a very bad feeling. Tang Minglong was expressionless. I don't care if you cause trouble elsewhere, but I will not allow you to take one step into the wide prosperity heaven. Otherwise I will kill you. Ji Wuming did not speak at first, but after a while, a smile appeared on his lips, and then he laughed loudly. I know, you should be that person with the surname Xiao, right? I really did not think that you also had the chance to reincarnate. Aren't you the same? Tang Minglong asked calmly. Seeing that Tang Minglong did not deny it, the smile on Ji Wuming's face faded, turning into a mocking expression. Xiao Tianxiong, 8th Heaven Celestial King, your battle prowess is not ordinary. Unfortunately, you have already died, and a remnant soul has obtained a chance to be reborn. What can you do to me? It is more than enough to kill you, Tang Minglong said darkly, his tone suddenly becoming incredibly cold. If their conversation was heard by other severing mundane tears, they would definitely pale in shock. Ji Wuming really was the reincarnation of a celestial king, and he was an 8th Heaven Celestial King, only a step away from the peak stage. In the entire celestial realm, he could be considered a top-tier existence. However, even this type of immortal king died, only leaving behind a strand of ruined soul. Through some type of reincarnation he came back to life. His past lifestyle skills were all erased, so he could only start from scratch. Ji Wuming wasn't afraid at all. He said leisurely, Xiao Tianxiong, do you know why I reincarnated? Seeing Tang Minglong's disapproving expression, he continued, I didn't die in my previous life. I abandoned my immortal king body and barged into the land of reincarnation. What? This time, Tang Minglong finally revealed a shocked expression. Even his entire body was covered with a layer of goosebumps, as if he was a mortal who had encountered a ghost. You. He stuttered, unable to complete his sentence. Ji Wuming grinned. It's very difficult for me to kill you now, and it's even more impossible for you to kill me. So it's better for us to mind our own business. Otherwise, I'll be able to kill you easily even if I have to use a few of my trump cards. Surprisingly, Tang Minglong didn't refute him. His entire body was still trembling. Even an ordinary 9th Heaven Celestial King can't barge into the land of reincarnation. Who are you? How many battle achievements have you made to be so favored by the heaven and earth? Ji Wuming fell silent, and a rare expression of solemnity appeared on his face. After a long time he said, I've been fighting at the border for too long, and I've already forgotten who I am. Since you've also returned from there, you should know how grim the situation there is. Yes. Tang Mingjing nodded solemnly. There was a sliver of respect, and even reverence in his expression. This was extremely astonishing. He had been an 8th Heaven Celestial King in his past life, and he was practically one of the top elites in the world. Yet he actually showed reverence towards another person? Just what kind of existence was that Ji Wuming? 9th Heaven Celestial King? What was going on? A 9th Heaven Celestial King could die. No. According to Ji Wuming, he had abandoned his immortal king body to barge into the land of reincarnation. That was why he had this brand new Ji Wuming, who was merely at the severing mundane tier. Why did he have to do this? Wasn't a 9th Heaven Celestial King one of the top existences in the world? Yet he still had to abandon his own body. Those old geezers only want to protect themselves. If they want to completely eradicate the tide of darkness, they can only become heavenly venerables, Ji Wuming said. His voice was drawn out, and it was like the tolling of a bell that had transcended the ages. Tang Minglong appeared even more respectful, and he said, "My lord, in order to eradicate the tide of darkness, you didn't hesitate to abandon your immortal king body. I truly admire you." He showed a sliver of hesitation. "Now these young people are also the hope of the future. Please show mercy, my lord. For the sake of the great cause, there must be sacrifices," Ji Wuming said calmly. "I was even willing to abandon my immortal king body and risk my life to barge into the land of reincarnation. I've already made such a sacrifice, so can't these juniors be sacrificed as well?" But Tang Minglong clearly didn't agree with his words. "There are no buts." Ji Wuming's tone was resolute. "I've only said so much to you because you've also contributed greatly to the border. But if you say any more, I'll take your life." Tang Minglong hesitated, but he quickly said, "I've crossed into the land of reincarnation only because I want to become an immortal king once more, and then go to the border to resist the tide of darkness. I've done so to protect my descendants. But my lord, if you want me to watch helplessly as you slaughter the hope of the future, then forgive me for not being able to comply. Take Yi from the wide prosperity heaven for example. He's an outstanding genius, and he has an extremely high chance of becoming an immortal king in the future. He can become one of the main forces in resisting the tide of darkness. Such a talent shouldn't die in the hands of my lord. Instead, he should be given a chance to grow." "How short-sighted," Ji Wuming said sinisterly. He suddenly charged towards Tang Minglong, striking out with a palm. Boom! The entire world turned pitch black. Only his palm seemed to be an ancient existence that could split the heavens and split the earth apart, and could suppress everything. This possessed the might of a celestial king, yet it wasn't complete celestial king power. It was just like how Ling Han possessed the nine heavens flame. That was clearly a celestial king tier level flame, but due to the limitation of cultivation level, it was essentially a celestial king tier flame, yet its might was much weaker. "Apologies, my lord," Tang Minglong said softly. "Pa pa pa." The bones in his body crackled violently, and he instantly transformed from a short dwarf into a man that was 7 feet tall, exploding with supreme might. He fearlessly charged forward, filled with a strong sense of righteousness. In their last lives, that Tang Minglong was definitely no match for Ji Wuming. If an 8th heaven celestial king encountered a 9th heaven celestial king, a direct confrontation would only result in death. But now, they were both 5th severance monarch tiers, and due to the limitation of cultivation level, the might of an 8th heaven celestial king or a 9th heaven celestial king was actually not much different. Thus, the battle was extremely intense, and it was difficult to determine the victor. True enough, it was just as Ji Wuming had said at the beginning. If he wanted to kill Tang Minglong, it wouldn't be easy. He had to use some kind of ultimate move, and if Tang Minglong wanted to kill him, it would be completely impossible. The intense battle continued without end. They set off in the afternoon, and woke up at midnight the next day. It was more refreshing to read on their phones. Chapter 1972. For the sake of the true explanation of Great Tao, the calm peace heaven, and the wide prosperity heaven set aside their enmity, and chose to join forces. Before coming here, everyone had made sufficient preparations. For example, Yin Xianlu, Lu Jia, and the others had all prepared some kind of formation that could greatly increase their battle prowess to fight against heaven-defying freaks like Yi and Shu Yering. But now, the heavenly soul tier monster definitely surpassed the level of Yi and Shu Yering, so everyone had to join forces to stand against it. Ling Han actually had a trump card, and that was the poisonous fruit of the spotted red-green bamboo, with just a drop. So what if it was a heavenly soul tier monster? It was guaranteed to die immediately, but he didn't want to use it now. It was a trump card, so how could he show it all at once? Everyone gathered, but each small group was in their own formation, commanded by one person, so they were a little sparse when they went up. What's going on with Tang Minglong? He actually hasn't come yet? Shu Yering frowned. This was a powerful existence that was similar in strength to her. And with Tang Minglong, their chances of victory would increase greatly. But they couldn't keep waiting. And now with the addition of two powerful existences, Ling Han and Hu Niu, they could more or less match Tang Minglong, right? She thought. Listen to my orders, Xu Yaring commanded, which made the Empress and Hu Niu very displeased. Why did they have to listen to her? Ling Han didn't mind. This was only a temporary alliance, so it didn't matter who was in command. Go! Xu Yaring took the lead, drawing out a celestial sword. As the sword swept past, a brilliant light shot out. Endless regulations rippled, as if the heaven and earth had been forcibly sliced open. After the sword ray swept past, it left behind a black hole. Everyone also moved, and there were about 100 or so prodigies moving together. Croak! That toad was originally lying down lazily and sleeping, but when everyone stepped into a certain area, it suddenly opened its eyes. They were scarlet like blood, with endless killing intent. Its whole body trembled and shio 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 shio. The sky was filled with spikes that swept towards everyone. Every spike carried a frightening murderous aura, as if they were all supreme celestial weapons that could shatter everything. Whether this could shatter everything was unknown to Ling Han, but it could easily kill a fifth severance. He had underestimated this toad too much. Ling Han hurriedly moved in a flash, and stood in front of the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ro. He channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll, raising his defenses to the maximum. Pu 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 pu. At least 7 sharp spikes attacked his body at the same time. The regulations of slaughter materialized, and black light surged, wanting to break through Ling Han's defense and pierce through him. However, Ling Han had actively channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll. Even if he couldn't defeat an immortal palace tier cultivator, at least he wouldn't be able to defeat a heaven soul tier cultivator. The spikes couldn't penetrate Ling Han's body, but the huge force carried Ling Han and sent him flying backwards. Bam! Ling Han's group of 4 slammed into a steep mountain wall behind them. Swish, swish, swish. Countless fine stones fell down, and the 4 of them finally stopped their retreat. Other than Ling Han, the other 3 girls spurted out blood. Though they hadn't received a direct attack, they were still heavily wounded by the final collision. Conversely, Ling Han, under the protection of the indestructible heaven scroll, was completely unscathed. As expected of a heaven soul tier cultivator, this attack power was too terrifying. And this was only Ling Han. The others. Previously, Ling Han hadn't been in the mood to care about others, and now that he looked again, he saw a field of wounded people. Some people had their lower abdomen pierced, and some had their arms and thighs pierced. If they were directly hit in the mind, they would definitely die on the spot. Even if they weren't, their expressions were extremely ugly, and they all swallowed precious medicines or took out life-saving treasures to suppress their murderous aura. The regulations of slaughter entered their bodies, and heaven soul tier cultivators were completely suppressed. It would instantly attack the mind and destroy their spirit. Thus, for the sake of their own lives, what else could they be unwilling to do? It was too tragic. Over 100 monarchs and emperor tiers had joined forces, but they couldn't even get close. The toad had killed 7 of them, severely wounded a few dozen, and lightly wounded less than 10. Xu Yaring was naturally someone who had been lightly wounded. Though she had charged at the front lines, the second strongest severing mundane tier in the wide prosperity heaven was indeed not just for show. Her battle prowess was incredibly astonishing, and at least her defenses were definitely freakish. But now she didn't look smug at all. She was naturally clear about how strong she was, and there was no need to be complacent. The problem was this toad was so strong, so how could she take it down? Actually, she could deal with it alone, but she would have to pay a very high price. Furthermore, she would lose her battle prowess for a short period of time, so she naturally couldn't use it in public unless she could confirm her own absolute safety. Unfortunately, who here would earn her such trust? What should she do? The precious treasure was right in front of her, and there was no reason not to take it. However, in the outside world, heaven souls still didn't have the right to be called elites. Only immortal palace tier had this right. But here, heaven souls were like overlords, and even monarchs were helpless against them. Why don't we go and obtain the fiery flame lightning strike wood first? Someone suggested. All right, you go, someone immediately said. No one was willing to leave. After all, they didn't even know where the fiery flame lightning strike wood was. It was a massive valley, so it was easier said than done to find it. Moreover, even if they found it, whether they could obtain the acknowledgement of the source power of heaven and earth was another matter. It wasn't like this true explanation of Great Way, which could be obtained. No, as long as one could carefully study it, they would be able to improve their own abilities and benefit from it for the rest of their lives. No one was an idiot, so how could they not know how to calculate this? Let Nyo do it. Nyo wiped the corner of her mouth, her eyes filled with a fierce light. They actually dared to injure her, so she was truly enraged. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Don't save your ultimate move for the last moment." He strode forwards, deciding to use the poisonous fruit of the mottled red-green bamboo. He had already planned from the beginning. If joining forces could be effective, then he would hide the mottled red-green bamboo. If it didn't work, then he would use it. He wouldn't reveal his trump card if he could, and he was determined to obtain the true explanation of Great Way of the regulations of slaughter. The toad didn't take advantage of the situation to pursue them. As long as everyone left a certain area, it wouldn't have any reaction. It would just lie down lazily and sleep. But when Ling Han stepped into a certain area, it immediately opened its eyes and fixed its eyes on Ling Han. Xiao, with a spring of its limbs, its figure leapt up. Its speed was shockingly fast, and it instantly arrived in front of Ling Han. This obviously wasn't teleportation, but it more or less achieved the same effect. A blood-red tongue spat out, and like a spirit spear, it directly attacked Ling Han's face. This attack was too fierce and too fast. Ling Han couldn't dodge at all, and was instantly slapped on the face. He felt a slight burning sensation on his face. The regulations of slaughter had turned into a sharp awl, drilling into his face until it hurt. This was still because he had the protection of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. Otherwise, if this tongue lashed out, his face would definitely have been flattened. It's my turn to attack. Ling Han drew his sword, but his hand stretched out, yet there was nothing there to exert force on. As it turned out, he had already been sent flying by this attack. Nyo and the Empress leapt out at the same time, catching Ling Han. Ling Han, your face was smeared with the toad's saliva. Should Nyo kiss you in the future, or not? Nyo was extremely conflicted. If she kissed him, she would find it disgusting, and if she didn't kiss him, she wouldn't be able to control herself. Nyo was extremely conflicted. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 1973. Ling Han could only smile wryly. Couldn't this girl's mind be filled with more normal thoughts? He stood up himself and looked at the toad that had begun to sleep again, while the scene just now replayed in his mind. I need to draw my sword earlier, he told himself. Again, he charged out again. Pung, in an instant he was shot back like a cannonball. This time, he directly crashed into the mountain wall, causing the ground to tremble slightly. He struck too early, and the power was not enough. Again, Pung Pung Pung. Ling Han struck 7 times in a row. But each time, he either struck too late and did not hit anything, or too early, and the power was too weak, unable to pierce through the toad's defenses and release the poison. Everyone was amused and shocked. Did you go to fight a monster? Or get your ass pierced by a monster? How many times had it happen and you still enjoyed it? But it wasn't like everyone was unaware of the toad's attack power. Even Xu Yaring didn't dare to face its might head-on. Yet Ling Han had suffered 7 consecutive attacks without even a scratch on his skin. How terrifying was that? This guy was also a monster. Xu Yaring's eyes shone, and she thought, he is definitely not a celestial king that has experienced reincarnation. But if he is not a celestial king, how could he possess such powerful strength? Could it be that he is another unparalleled freak, that even the reincarnation of a celestial king can only concede defeat? Is he the second freak? Ling Han shook his head. The toad was too fast, and its attacks were too swift. That fleeting instant was not easy to grasp. If he wanted to stab this monster, it would be impossible to do so without several hundred attempts. The problem was that the number of times he could actively channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll was limited, and he could only use it 3 times at most. He had to succeed as soon as possible. I can only use the regulations of time, Ling Han thought. Furthermore, he had to draw on the power of the Black Tower. Otherwise, with his 5th severance, which was equivalent to the power of Yang Soul, it would be too difficult to have any effect on a Heaven Soul. It was practically wishful thinking. Though this would exhaust his power, his own defenses would not weaken because of exhaustion, and he was not afraid that others would take the opportunity to attack him. Moreover, Hunyou and the Empress's battle prowess were enough to guarantee their right to speak. As for Bewitching Maiden Ro's battle prowess, he completely ignored it. Bewitching Maiden Ro. It was worth a try, and it had to work. Ling Han strode out, and once again charged in the direction of the stone tablet. It was going to happen again. Everyone was already used to this scene. They all muttered in their hearts, but they couldn't help but admire Ling Han's courage. Goo. The toad's voice was completely emotionless. It did not lose interest in Ling Han because he had fucked him too many times, nor did it become angry because he had been teased too many times. Just like before, it charged out. Pa, a tongue lashed out just like before. Ling Han drew on the power of the Black Tower and pressed out with his palm. Wang, the toad suddenly stopped and very strangely floated in the air. However, it was only for an instant before it regained its original speed and shot toward Ling Han. The Heavenly Soul was too powerful. The time stop spell was only effective for less than 1/100th of a heartbeat. However, this amount of time was more than enough for Ling Han. He tilted his body slightly to the side and avoided the toad's tongue. However, because the duration of the time stop spell was too short, this tongue still whipped him. It didn't completely avoid him, and the whip sent Ling Han flying backwards again. At this moment, Ling Han raised his hand, and the divine demon sword left his hand. It turned into a streak of light and shot toward the toad. He concentrated all of his power into this one strike. Pa! Ling Han was instantly sent flying, and the divine demon sword, which carried Ling Han's hope, shot into the toad's body with a pu. Success? Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. This was too shocking. The 5th severance, which was a Yang soul against a heavenly soul, could actually result in injuries to both sides. This was practically unbelievable. He was definitely a fuck you monster. But immediately, many people shook their heads. So what? Even if a heavenly soul suffered a full power attack from a Yang soul, it wouldn't hurt or tickle. This kind of injury to both sides would be a heavy injury for a Yang soul. But for a heavenly soul, it would only be a light injury. A scratch or not even a scratch. So what effect could it have? Pa! Ling Han sat down on the ground and couldn't help but smile. If the divine demon sword grazed him, this large toad would definitely be dead. Smeared with the red-green bamboo poisonous fruit, it could even kill an immortal palace realm cultivator. The Empress and Hunyou both came to support Ling Han. As for the divine demon sword, they temporarily couldn't be bothered with it. It was still stuck in the large toad's body. If they went to retrieve it now, wouldn't that be courting death? Pung pung pung. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the toad suddenly jumped violently, as if it had been bewitched. After a short while it suddenly collapsed, and the spikes all over its body scattered on the ground, revealing a red stone. Fuck, it died? Everyone was dumbfounded, feeling that this was extremely unbelievable. You only threw out a sword. Unless it was a real celestial tool that had awakened, how could it possibly kill a heavenly soul-level monster? Disbelief. Disbelief. However, in the blink of an eye, a dozen or so people immediately dashed out, targeting the divine demon sword. Whether it was a celestial tool or not, they would think about it after they got their hands on it. Wayaya, what despicable people! Hunyou was furious and immediately charged out. You guys are too disgusting. Ling Han killed that ugly toad. And it's fine if you guys aren't grateful, but you actually want to steal his things. Niu is going to beat you guys to death. Pung pung pung. She fought all of them alone and began to battle with them. Emperor Tears were no match for her at all. But there were still 3 Monarch Tears who joined the fight, and one of them was shockingly Fei Yin. These 3 people, especially Fei Yin, were not people that Hunyeo could easily deal with, and a fierce battle ensued. Ling Han was rapidly recovering his vitality, so it was not convenient for him to make a move now. Meanwhile, the Empress stayed by his side to protect him. Haha, since the monster has been dealt with, the alliance should also be dissolved. A monarch tear from the wide prosperity heaven laughed loudly, and then his expression turned cold. Trash of the calm peace heaven, get out of my way. With a glance, it was clear that Ling Han had already lost his battle prowess, and the only one worth paying attention to on the calm peace heaven's side was Hunyeo. Could this not be easily dealt with? A treasure like the true explanation of great Tao could create supreme prodigies, and the wide prosperity heaven and the calm peace heaven were in a fierce competition, so they naturally did not hope that the people of the calm peace heaven could comprehend the true explanation of great Tao. Shameless, Yin Xianlu, and the others all rebuked. This monster that guarded the true explanation of great Tao had been killed by Ling Han. But now these people not only wanted to bask in his glory, but also wanted to chase away the main culprit and steal his precious tool. This was too disgusting. If you don't get out, don't blame us for being merciless. A monarch tear from the wide prosperity heaven said menacingly. His name was Yi Linfeng, and he was ranked 5th. He was definitely a top-notch character. Fight it out with them. The people of the calm peace heaven were all filled with righteous indignation. Firstly, they were indeed furious, and secondly, because the true explanation of great Tao was too tempting, who would be willing to give it up? Ha 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 ha. Fei Yin laughed loudly, a sword shockingly appearing in his hand. He had snatched the divine demon sword. Chapter 1974. Fei Yin was very pleased with himself. He felt that he had gotten his revenge. Previously, Ling Han had used the iron spear to burst his chrysanthemum, making him a fool of himself in front of everyone. Now, he had snatched one of Ling Han's treasures, and had ruthlessly slapped him in the face. Awesome, this is awesome! Hunyeo stood still, staring fixedly at Fei Yin like an enraged little lion. Her black hair fluttered even though there was no wind, and her eyes were spitting flames. Hong! The sound of a great tide rose, and a giant rock appeared behind her. It flapped its wings and swung its tail, and a pattern of great Tao appeared, as if it could suppress the heavens. She was truly enraged and wanted to kill this despicable person at all costs. Too disgusting, too despicable, too shameless. Fei Yin was completely unconcerned. His battle prowess should be slightly inferior to Hunyeo's, but he was still a monarch tier whose battle prowess ranked in the top 10, after all, so the difference wouldn't be too great. He was completely capable of putting up a fight. This is forged from devouring gold metal. He examined the divine demon sword, and couldn't help but feel incredibly excited. Devouring metal. As long as there was enough godly metal to devour, then it would one day advance to the level of divine metal. It was even rumored that immortal metal was not the limit of the devouring gold steel. As long as there was enough immortal metal to devour, it could continue to grow. Of course, the amount of immortal metal was pitifully small. Even the majority of immortal kings could only drool and become envious. Who would be willing to let the devouring metal devour it? However, it was undoubtedly possible for the divine demon sword to reach the level of a celestial tool. I'm rich, I'm really rich. Fei Yin laughed loudly, feeling extremely satisfied. Snatching a future immortal weapon from the hands of his enemy made him feel extremely satisfied. What? Devouring gold steel? The other emperors of wide prosperity heaven were similarly overjoyed. This was equivalent to obtaining an immortal artifact. It was no wonder that it could easily kill that heavenly soul monster. It turned out that this was a future immortal weapon. Of course it was awesome. However, no one knew that this wasn't the power of the divine demon sword. Of course, the divine demon sword itself had also played a huge role, breaking through the toad's defenses and giving the mottled green bamboo fruit time to take effect. To them, it was the divine demon sword that had unleashed its might and killed that heavenly soul monster. Such a treasure had to be fought for. Fei Yin, hand over the sword. Right, hand it over. It belongs to our wide prosperity heaven. I can't have it all to myself. Everyone shouted. How could Fei Yin be willing? He would rather become public enemy number 1 to protect this divine sword. You all deserve to die, Hunyo said in a low voice. Her fury had already burned to the extreme, and an indescribable aura surged out from her body, capable of crushing everything. Fei Yin and the others were greatly shocked. At this moment, Hunyo reminded them of that freak E. Even with so many people joining forces, they still felt a chill in their hearts. They did not have the slightest chance of winning. Ling Han had already recovered some of his strength. He stood up with his own strength and said indifferently, "Do you know that greed can kill people?" Hee hee. Everyone sneered. What kind of joke was this? According to what he said, everyone should just stay at home and not come out to fight for treasures. If you insist on seeking your own death, then you can't blame others, Ling Han said as he raised his finger slightly. Shwa! A flash of sword light flashed, and the divine demon sword suddenly moved, piercing towards Fei Yin. Fei Yin was greatly shocked. Only now did he remember that this was Ling Han's treasure. Even if it had left Ling Han's hands, as long as the martial art intent within it was not erased, it could still be controlled by Ling Han. He was too excited. At first, it was because he had snatched his enemy's treasure, and then he discovered that the divine demon sword was forged from devouring metal. This made him so excited that he forgot some common sense, such as erasing the martial art intent within the sword and replacing it with his own. Of course, whether he could erase it was another matter. The sword light attacked, and Fei Yin hurriedly grabbed the hilt, wanting to swing the treasure sword away. After dodging this attack, he would immediately refine Ling Han's martial art intent and make this treasure sword truly his. However, as the sword attacked, multiple symbols of Great Tao jumped, causing the heaven and earth to resonate, and its power was extraordinarily great. Although Fei Yin had successfully reversed the momentum of his sword and avoided striking any vital parts of his body, the divine demon sword had launched a sudden attack, catching him off guard. Moreover, the divine demon sword was extraordinarily powerful. Thus, the tip of the sword had still sliced into his thigh. Damn it! Fei Yin roared in anger. This was really extreme joy turning to sorrow. He had not thought that he would be made a fool of by Ling Han. He humphed and said, "This sword is still mine. Don't even think about taking it back." Such a treasure, even a celestial king would be tempted. Since it had fallen into his hands, how could he possibly give it up? Ling Han shook his head. After being poisoned by the red spot green bamboo fruit, even if he immediately treated himself, he might not be able to save his life. What more when Fei Yin was so careless and arrogant? He naturally would not remind him and calmly said, "If heaven wants your life, no one can stop it." Nonsense. Fei Yin was just about to scold him, but suddenly discovered that something was wrong. He felt an indescribable power suddenly begin to wreak havoc in his body, directly attacking his mind, filled with corrosive might. He pointed at Ling Han, and was just about to speak, when his whole body suddenly stopped. His whole body suddenly collapsed, but before he hit the ground, he had already turned into liquid, his body and spirit destroyed. What? This scene caused everyone's hair to stand on end. It was only a sword strike on his thigh, and it was not deep, only a graze, but it was actually able to take the life of a fifth severance monarch tier. Too terrifying. Ling Han turned his right hand, and Xiao, the divine demon sword, immediately flew back to him. Because Fei Yin had died too quickly and too strangely, no one dared to stop him, afraid that they would also follow in Fei Yin's footsteps. They could only watch as the divine demon sword fell back into Ling Han's hands. Pa! Ling Han caught the divine demon sword, put it into the Black Tower, and calmly said, "Fine, didn't you guys want to break up the alliance? Then let's fight." His condition had not recovered to its peak, but these words were filled with domineering dominance, causing the blood of the people of the calm peace heaven to boil, and they felt their scalps go numb. If they wanted to fight, then fight. What were they afraid of? Come on. I'll beat you bastards to death. The prodigies of the calm peace heaven all roared. The main reason was that some people of the wide prosperity heaven were really too unscrupulous, not only burning the bridge after crossing it, but also stealing Ling Han's treasured sword, causing everyone to suppress a belly full of anger. Now Ling Han's words completely ignited their anger, and it was released with a bang. Forget it, we are all people of the celestial realm, and we also have a common enemy, so it's best if we don't damage the harmony. Xu Yaring came out to mediate. Damage the harmony? Yi Linfeng said darkly. Fairy Xu, you've also arrived. Fei Yun has just died tragically in front of us. So how can we still coexist peacefully with the calm peace heaven? That's right, the prodigies of our wide prosperity heaven cannot die in vain. Moreover, that brat clearly had the ability to kill monsters, yet deliberately concealed his strength from the start, and tricked and killed a few prodigies of our wide prosperity heaven. His intentions are deserving of death. This was really an unreasonable argument. Xu Yaring frowned slightly. She could see the big picture, but some things were not convenient to say, so she didn't know how to persuade them at this moment. Chapter 1976. Ling Han humphed softly and slashed out at Ji Wuming with his sword. Previously, he had to block the monarch tiers of the wide prosperity heaven and couldn't attack Ji Wuming. Now, even Xu Yaring was chasing after Ji Wuming, so he naturally had the time to attack. Brat, it's not your turn yet. Ji Wuming's figure flashed, and he was like a fish going against the current in a huge wave. No matter how huge the wave was, he could easily pass through it. Ling Han hadn't recovered his full battle prowess, so he couldn't stop him at all. He saw Ji Wuming open his mouth, and that monarch tier of the calm peace heaven was swallowed whole. You have something that I need. Ji Wuming stopped, his eyes fixed on Ling Han. I need to save this kind of feast for last to slowly enjoy. He should have sensed the two source powers of heaven and earth, the Xianing source water and nine heavens flame. However, being able to do so at the fifth severance, such a sensitive spirit was too astonishing. Who was this Ji Wuming? If Ling Han could have heard the conversation between Ji Wuming and Tang Minglong, then he would have come to a sudden realization. He was the reincarnation of a ninth heaven celestial king. So what if he had some abilities above his cultivation level? In the past, he had been a supreme being that could run amok in the celestial realm. So it would be strange if he didn't have some special techniques and abilities now. Ling Han, the Empress, Hu Niu, and Xu Yaring moved together and began to chase after Ji Wuming. If these four people joined forces, they should be invincible in the severing mundane tier. The truth was so. Ji Wuming didn't fight them head-on at all, and simply used his movement technique to attack others. His movement technique was as slippery as a fish, swimming freely under the attacks of the four people. Occasionally, when there was an attack that he couldn't dodge, he would swing his bow, hook and block, dispersing the attack. Then, he would calmly charge towards others. Ling Han and the others could only chase after him in vain, but couldn't do anything to him at all. Left with no choice, Ling Han could only draw Bewitching Maiden Row into the Black Tower, his heart filled with shock. They were all fifth severance, and it seemed like Ji Wuming's battle prowess wasn't particularly strong, but he was still toying with four peak monarch tiers. It would be futile to continue fighting like this. Ling Han slowed down his attacks, and carefully observed Wuming Ji's every move. Gradually he discovered something. Ji Wuming's realm was indeed the same as theirs, but his grasp of the laws had reached an extremely precise level. He was familiar with every minute change. Hence, when he was attacked, he was like a butcher dismembering an ox, easily dispelling the attack. However, although Ling Han knew this, he could do nothing about it. In fact, he could not even imitate it. This was built on an endless grasp of the laws, which required an endless amount of time to achieve. It was also like studying the true explanation of the Great Tao every day, mastering the basics of the laws to a proficient level. Xiaoqin could not help but be shocked. Ji Wuming's vital flame might only have lived for several tens of thousands of years, which was not much different from Xiaoqian's. However, in terms of their grasp of the laws, the difference between them was like the distance between heaven and earth. He was unable to accept this. Could it be that there really was a heaven-defying monster who needed only a few years to reach a height that others needed hundreds of millions of years to reach? One had to know that he was already at the level of a monster. Returning to that question, if Ling Han knew that Ji Wuming had been a ninth heaven celestial king, he would come to a sudden realization. Ninth heaven celestial kings might have lived for several trillion years, or even several epochs. Then, what was strange about their grasp of the laws to an extremely precise level? There were fewer and fewer people on the battlefield. Furthermore, no one dared to flee, because the moment they left the protection of Ling Han and the others, they would be easily caught up by Ji Wuming, and then swallowed. However, if they stayed on the battlefield, Ling Han and the others would not be able to completely protect them, either. They would only be waiting for death instead of a quick death. This happened to Emperor Tears, causing them to feel gloomy and indignant. Which one of them was not a famous figure? In the future, even if they did not become celestial kings, they would definitely become ascending origin tier elites. Yet they had actually fallen to such a state. Tragic. Only monarch tiers like Yin Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and Lao Song could survive. That was because without the interference of the wide prosperity heaven, with their strength, they would be able to exchange a few blows with Ji Wuming, and they would be able to last until Ling Han and the others came to their rescue. Just like that, after a mere hour, aside from Ji Wuming, there were only 7 living people, and they were all monarch tiers. Stop, Ji Wuming said calmly. It is impossible for you all to do anything to me, and I do not want to waste my trump cards on you all for the time being, either. Why don't we all sit down and use this true explanation of great Tao? Dream on. Xu Yarong rebuked angrily and continued to attack. Ling Han was also brimming with fighting spirit. This kind of opponent was too rare. He had gained greatly from battling with Ji Wuming. In terms of how to use regulations, Ji Wuming was a grandmaster. As long as Ling Han could catch up in terms of the details of regulations in the future, there would be an obvious increase in his strength. And the true explanation of Great Tao was a treasure that could enrich the details. Yin Xianlu and the others also joined the ranks of the attackers. 7 great monarch tiers joined forces to battle Ji Wuming. But even so, Ji Wuming was still incredibly calm, and even occasionally posed a terrifying threat to Shan Jitong and Lao Song. These 2 were the obvious weakest of the 7, and were practically no match for Ji Wuming. The moment they were attacked, they would be in a perilous situation. In just a few exchanges, the 2 of them were wounded, their celestial blood flowing all over the ground, and they looked extremely wretched. Yin Xianlu had the thought of putting the 2 of them into his spatial god tool. But firstly, this would damage their pride, and secondly, putting them into the spatial god tool was not very safe. If the spatial god tool was snatched away by Ji Wuming, then Shan Jitong and Lao Song would be dead for sure. Thus, with these 2 restraining them, the battle prowess of Ling Han's group of 7 fell greatly, and they were led by the nose by Ji Wuming. This person's battle experience and awareness were all top-notch. This should be an instinctive reaction that had naturally formed after experiencing innumerable battles. There was already no need for him to think about how to battle. His body had long since made the most correct reaction. The more Ling Han fought, the more puzzled he became. He asked, "Who exactly are you?" "I am just a nobody," Ji Wuming said calmly. Then he swept an eye over Xu Yarong and said, "One last suggestion, how about you stop?" Ling Han was the first to stop. Though he very much wanted to defeat Ji Wuming, he really could not do anything to the latter. Of course, if it was a one-on-one battle, he was completely unafraid of the latter. First of all, could Ji Wuming tear through his defenses? Then, he could unleash the might of the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water without any restraint. Most importantly, his present battle prowess had not recovered, and he could not borrow the power of the Black Tower either. Ling Han stopped, and the Empress and Hunyo naturally stopped as well, though they too were very displeased. Then Yin Xianlu and the others also stopped. Only Xu Yarong was still fighting, and she was extremely furious. At the foot of the Green Summit Mountain, the rabbit monster is in a daze, and by the side of the lightning river, the flood dragon is showing off its might. Ji Wuming suddenly said a few words without rhyme or reason. You. Xu Yarong's expression changed drastically, and her attacks suddenly stopped. Even her slender figure began to tremble, appearing to be incredibly agitated. Chapter 1977. Ji Wuming broke into a smile and said, "Little girl, let's not fight anymore, right?" "My lord." Xu Yaring suddenly knelt down, tears gushing out of her eyes. She was extremely excited. What was going on? As they fought, it became like they were acknowledging each other. Xu Yaring looked like she was prostrating herself on the ground. So if Ji Wuming wanted to kill her, she would probably just smile and wait to be slaughtered. From the looks of it, Xu Yaring seemed to be Ji Wuming's subordinate, but she was a monarch tier, and a top-notch one at that. So how could she be subordinate to someone else? Furthermore, Xu Yaring clearly did not recognize Ji Wuming at the beginning, at least not with her current identity. Only when he pointed it out did she come to a realization, and then burst into tears. Who was Ji Wuming? Not just that, but Xu Yaring should also have another identity. Ling Han frowned and said, "Don't just reminisce about the past. Don't you think you should explain?" "You're not qualified to know," Ji Wuming said calmly. Ji Wuming asked calmly. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han, and a golden dot appeared in his eyes. His gaze was profound, and he said, "Aside from the two source powers of heaven and earth, you should have something else on you. Moreover, it's even more valuable because I can't tell." Ling Han was stunned. What kind of monster was this? More valuable than the source power of heaven and earth? And he had definitely discovered the Black Tower. But Small Tower had said that as long as he did not actively use the Black Tower in front of celestial kings, he could not possibly be discovered. Of course, it was a low-level celestial king, but Ji Wuming was only a fifth severance, to say nothing of a high-level celestial king. So how could he discover the existence of the Black Tower? Yin Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and the others were also stunned. Ling Han actually had two source powers of heaven and earth. That was a source power of heaven and earth. Like divine metal, most celestial kings could only dream about it. But Ling Han, this severing mundane tier, not only had one but two. How could they believe that? Furthermore, there was a treasure even more valuable than the source power of heaven and earth. What was that? Yin Xianlu, and the others could not imagine it. Ling Han calmed down and said, "The reincarnation of a celestial king?" He was not referring only to Ji Wuming, but also to Xu Yaring. Since there was Tang Minglong, who was suspected to be the reincarnation of an immortal king, why couldn't there be another Ji Wuming or Xu Yaring? Ji Wuming shook his head, clearly unwilling to say anything more. He just stared at Ling Han, his eyes growing brighter and brighter. "Even I can't see through such a secret treasure. Ha 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 ha, I have some confidence." He retracted his gaze and strode towards the stone of the Great Tao. He sat down cross-legged and began to comprehend it. So carefree, so unguarded. However, as he sat there, his back was like a huge mountain that connected the heavens. Others could only look up at him, not daring to attack him. This was an aura that was domineering to the extreme. In his past life, this person was definitely a supreme great emperor who stood at the peak of the immortal Tao. Ling Han said in his mind, then communicated with Small Tower. "What do you think of this person?" Ling Han asked. "Extraordinary, very extraordinary." Small Tower spoke with a cautious tone. This was extremely rare. The Tsundra Tower had always been carefree and leisurely, taking pleasure in attacking him. Revealing this kind of cautious attitude was really rare. "His divine fetus is developing in the direction of perfection," Small Tower continued. "What do you mean?" Ling Han asked. "Divine fetus means that the ancestor has the blood of a celestial king flowing in it. In a certain life, it will suddenly return to its ancestry and possess a sliver of the power of a celestial king," Small Tower explained. It was rare that it didn't mock Ling Han's ignorance. Whatever regulations the ancestor of the celestial king cultivated, then the descendant will also possess the same regulations. This was very easy to understand. It was like how a chicken could only lay eggs. If it laid a duck egg, then it must have been done by the old king duck next door. However, the power of the divine fetus in this person is extremely heterogeneous. Logically speaking, this shouldn't exist. Small Tower revealed a look of confusion. However, on this person, the power of various divine fetus is currently fusing, all becoming his foundation. It seems like his divine fetus can obtain all the celestial king Taoist techniques. With the wisdom of so many predecessors, You can imagine how strong his foundation will be. Why do you need to collect more source power of heaven and earth before becoming a celestial king? It's to build a solid foundation so that when you become a celestial king, you can soar into the sky. And this is also the case for him. There are 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, and each step is like ascending to the heavens. However, if he can grasp all the techniques in the world once he becomes a celestial king, then perhaps a first heaven celestial king can kill a third heaven celestial king. If he said these words, he would probably be laughed to death. Who didn't know that the 9 heavens of the celestial king tier was very strict? A second heaven would definitely crush a first heaven, which was equivalent to a dividing soul tier beating a severing mundane tier. That was like a father beating his son, and the son could only take the beating. Now, he actually said that a first heaven celestial king could not only defeat a third heaven celestial king, but could even kill one? Wasn't this laughable? However, Ling Han didn't have the slightest intention of laughing. Ji Wuming must have been a celestial king in his previous life, and a high-level celestial king at that. Now, he was reincarnated, so if he wasn't the strongest, what was he? He was just guessing according to his own train of thought, and just happened to be right. Blazing fighting spirit rose in Ling Han's heart. He definitely had to defeat this person. He had to defeat him fair and square, and not use the power of the Black Tower, or the poisonous fruit of the spotted red bamboo to kill him. This person could elevate his martial art intent. That's more like it. Small Tower nodded, giving affirmation to Ling Han's idea. Don't pry into my thoughts, you perverted tower. If it weren't for the fact that I'm connected to your mind, do you think I would be willing to listen to your dirty thoughts? Small Tower retorted. Ling Han ignored Small Tower, and also strode towards the stone tablet of true explanation of Great Tao. Then he sat down in a cross-legged position, and began to comprehend it. With Ling Han leading the way, the Empress and Hunyou also walked over. He then released Bewitching Maiden Ro, and together with Yin Xianlu and the others, they all arrived in front of the stone tablet. However, Yin Xianlu and the others were still filled with wariness, fearing that Ji Wuming would suddenly rise in revolt. As if sensing the thoughts of the 3 of them, Ji Wuming suddenly turned around and grinned, scaring Shan Jitong and Lao Song so much that they almost wet their pants. Yin Xianlu also leaped up, assuming a defensive stance. Ji Wuming turned around and continued to comprehend the true explanation of Great Tao, as if he was only giving these 3 a scare. But because of this, Yin Xianlu and the others did not dare to get too close. They had to maintain a sufficient distance from that massive monster. Otherwise, who would they look for if they were eaten? However, one had to get close to the true explanation of Great Tao in order to understand it clearly. This was concealed by some mysterious power of heaven and earth, and it was definitely not something that one could understand clearly just by obtaining it. This drove Yin Xianlu and the others crazy. Xu Yaring was kneeling respectfully behind Ji Wuming like a maidservant, and it was truly astounding. Was she still the number 2 expert of Wide Prosperity Heaven's younger generation? Or the number 1 beauty? 3 days later, Ji Wuming stood up and glanced at Ling Han. Take care of yourself. The next time we meet, I will take all the good fortune you have. Ling Han opened his eyes and retorted. After I defeat you, I will spare your life. In comparison, he was more domineering and confident. So what if I spare your life? No matter how hard you chase after me, you will never be a match for me. Ha 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 ha. Ji Wuming laughed loudly and swaggered off. Chapter 1978. Ling Han retracted his gaze and looked at Xu Yaring. Xu Yaring didn't leave with him. She only sent Ji Wuming off with a sincere gaze. When he disappeared, she sat down, and her face regained the confidence and calmness that a top prodigy should have. At this moment, Xu Yaring was the real Xu Yaring. Miss Xu, who exactly is this Ji Wuming? Ling Han asked. Xu Yaring only smiled faintly and said, you should be able to guess. He's naturally an extraordinary person. Clearly, she wasn't willing to reveal Ji Wuming's true identity in his previous life. Ling Han could only guess. As he spoke, he paid attention to Xu Yaring's expression. He saw a flash of disdain in her eyes, though it was only for a moment. Ninth Heaven Celestial King, he said with certainty. Xu Yaring didn't comment, and didn't pay any more attention to Ling Han. Instead, she focused on the Great Tao Truth Stone Tablet. Ninth Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han affirmed this in his heart, and then a great wave of shock surged in his heart. Why did a Ninth Heaven Celestial King want to reincarnate? He already stood at the peak of the world. Could it be that in order to suppress celestial kings of the same level, and become truly invincible, he had resolutely abandoned his peerless Tao fruit, and started cultivating again? Becoming a celestial king was already very difficult, let alone returning to the ninth heaven. What if he still couldn't reach his original height? One shouldn't think that just because he was once a celestial king, he could definitely cultivate back to celestial king. Cultivation was originally a heaven-defying act. Reincarnating and cultivating again would be deliberately targeted by heaven and earth, and the difficulty of passing the tribulation would skyrocket. Moreover, who could guarantee that he wouldn't be ambushed on the way and die halfway? Even Ling Han didn't have the courage to sever his Tao fruit and start all over again. He already stood at the peak. How much willpower would it take to continue this / Little Tower? Is a ninth heaven celestial king really the peak of the celestial realm? Ling Han asked. He didn't believe that Ji Wuming had severed his Tao fruit because he wanted to become the strongest ninth heaven celestial king. After a long time, ninth heaven celestial kings would slowly make up for their flaws on the path of cultivation and reach perfection. Unless there was a fundamental change, and he wanted to break through to a higher level. In that case, there was only one possibility. A ninth heaven celestial king was not the peak of the celestial realm. Small Tower was silent for a moment, and then said, "Above the ninth heaven celestial king is the supreme of the heavens, the heavenly venerables." Celestial Venerable Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly recalled that Small Tower referred to the previous owner of the Black Tower as the Celestial Venerable. Above the ninth heaven celestial king was the Celestial Venerable, the Celestial Venerable, the Celestial Lord. What kind of existence is this? Ling Han's mouth was a little dry. A ninth heaven celestial king is on equal footing with the heavens and earth. It stands above the Grand Tao and is capable of controlling the heavens and the earth. A single thought is capable of taking form at any place in the world, and it's equivalent to a ninth heaven celestial king descending into the world. Even if one recites its title, it would be able to draw the reaction of the heavens and the earth, said the small pagoda slowly. Ling Han calmed his excitement, but his limbs felt cold. The master of the Black Tower was the Celestial Venerable, but he died. Yes. Small Tower did not hide anything this time, and readily admitted it. Even an Empyrean could perish. That was an existence that stood above the Great Tao. No wonder the indestructible heavens scroll was so awesome, able to attract the nine heavens flame and Xianin source water. That was because this was a technique that stood above the Great Tao. But the more he knew how powerful a Celestial Venerable was, the more Ling Han could not imagine how such an existence could possibly perish. Even if he wanted to commit suicide, it would be impossible. There was already no power in the world that could erase such an existence. You do not need to think too much now. Focus on raising your cultivation level. In the future, you will know everything, Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded. Small Tower's mouth was very tight. If it did not want to say anything, it would be useless no matter how he forced it. Obviously, Ji Wuming had destroyed his own fruit of Tao in order to break through to the heavenly venerable tier and step onto the true peak of the world. This kind of courage and decisiveness was incredibly astonishing. No wonder Xu Yaring worshipped this person so much. Hold on, then why did Xu Yaring also reincarnate? And Tang Minglong as well? Could it be that everyone wanted to break through to the heavenly venerable tier? Ling Han had solved one of his doubts, yet a new one had appeared in his mind, which drove him crazy. Forget it, he would not think about it anymore. He turned his attention to the stone tablet of true explanation of Great Tao, and focused on analyzing it. Ji Wuming's grasp of the basics of regulations had clearly reached an astonishing level. Thus, he only used 3 days' time to completely digest this true explanation of Great Tao. But Ling Han could not. He was a true severing mundane tier. And without the foundation of the regulations from his last life or several epochs, it was impossible for him to compare with Ji Wuming. After a whole half a year, Xu Yaring also stood up and glanced at Ling Han. There was some change in her expression, and it was uncertain. However, in the end, she did not do anything and drifted down the mountain. When she turned around, Ling Han also opened his eyes, a faint smile curling up the corners of his lips. If Xu Yaring had made a move against him just then, he would not have been polite either. He would have used all his power to kill her. He once again turned his attention to the true explanation of Great Tao, and continued to strengthen the foundation of his regulations of slaughter. A whole 13 years passed, and only then did Ling Han end his state of meditation. He had not completely comprehended this true explanation of Great Tao, but he had finally memorized every character in his mind. However, if he had to draw them out now, that would definitely be impossible. It could only be understood, and could not be conveyed in words. The heaven and earth would not allow it. He had once thought of digging out the stone tablet and storing it into the Black Tower, but he discovered that this was completely impossible. The stone tablet was one with the whole mountain, and if he wanted to store it, he would have to store it together. If this mountain had been constructed from ordinary mountain rocks, then Ling Han would not have minded. He could store it away with a wave of his hand. But the key was that this place was too special, and it was completely impossible for him to do that. Thus, he used 13 years' time to memorize the characters of Great Tao. Seeing that Hu Niu, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro were still in a state of meditation, Ling Han entered into the Black Tower and began to truly comprehend under the reincarnation tree. From this, it could be deduced that Hu Niu was not the reincarnation of a celestial king. Otherwise, with the foundation of her last life, how could she have needed such a long time to memorize this true explanation of Great Tao? Under the reincarnation tree, over 700,000 years of comprehending Tao passed in the blink of an eye. In the real world, 20 years had also passed. Ling Han exited the Black Tower. He had finally grasped the basics of the true explanation of Great Tao. It was only the preliminary stage, and he had not completely grasped it. But Hu Niu and the others were still forcibly memorizing the true explanation of Great Tao, so Ling Han did not disturb them. He entered into the Black Tower again, took out a Celestial King Bloodstone, and used it as a reference with the true explanation of Great Tao, and continued to comprehend the regulations of slaughter. Another 10 years passed in the real world, and under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han had comprehended for over 300,000 years. Only then did Hu Niu and the Empress finally end their meditation. They had completely imprinted the true explanation of Great Tao into their minds. Because bewitching Maiden Ro was still meditating, Ling Han drew the two women into the Black Tower. Everyone would study the regulations of slaughter together. Hu Niu was displeased. Why did she have to wait for this stupid bewitching maiden? But neither Ling Han nor the Empress said anything, so she could only enter into the Black Tower to comprehend obediently. Thankfully, this was still something new to her, which made the little girl very excited, and she was not bored. Thus, in the blink of an eye, another 50 years passed in the real world. Bewitching Maiden Ro finally stood up, and it had already been over 20 years since Yan Xianlu, Shan Jidong, and the others had left. This was the difference. Cell phones were more refreshing to read. Chapter 1980. In front of Ling Han, even Yan Xianlu had to admit that there was an existence that was even more freakish than him in this world. His talent in martial art was higher than his battle prowess was stronger than his, and he had the potential to become a grandmaster in alchemy, and now in formations he had left him far behind. How could there be such an all-round person in this world? With Ling Han and the Empress leading the way, they didn't stop even when they encountered a fork in the road. This naturally caused their speed to increase greatly. After another 2 months, figures once again appeared in front of them, but this time, there was an extremely large number of people. Xu Yaring and the survivors of the wide prosperity heaven, such as the Lu siblings. When she discovered that Ling Han and the others had caught up, Xu Yaring's beautiful eyes involuntarily narrowed, feeling slightly shocked. She was sure that Ling Han and the others would need to spend a very long time on the true explanation of Great Tao. But now they actually caught up. What did this mean? The speed at which they deciphered this formation far surpassed her own. She was shocked. Others did not know, but she was naturally aware. In her last life, she was a seventh heaven celestial king, and because she had lived for too long, she had a very deep understanding of the various Taos of the world. But now, she was actually inferior to a mere severing mundane tier cultivator? Humph! When it came to Ling Han and the others, the people of the wide prosperity heaven all showed unfriendly expressions. More than half of the people were slaughtered by Ji Wuming, and some had entered a fork in the road, unable to wait for Xu Yaring to arrive and follow them. Now there were only a total of 7 people in the wide prosperity heaven, and it appeared very deserted. Humph, what? Hunyo glared. Whoever is not convinced, come and fight. No one answered. Hunyo's ferocity was already deeply rooted in everyone's hearts, and only Xu Yaring could match her. Neither side communicated, and soon arrived at the fork in the road ahead. The group of people from the wide prosperity heaven all stopped, and with Xu Yaring in the lead, they began to make calculations to find the correct path. But Ling Han and the others did not stop, and directly chose a path. Fuck. Xu Yaring and the others were stunned. What was going on? Could it be that you guys had already found the correct path? Impossible, right? You knew at a glance. What kind of calculation ability was this? Follow. Xu Yaring immediately said. Even if this was a wrong path, they could immediately retreat. Of course, there was no need to doubt the memory of a celestial. They used their movement techniques to catch up. A day later, a new fork appeared in the road ahead. With the eyesight of an immortal, he only needed a glance to count how many forks there were. This number happened to be one more than the previous fork. In other words, this is the right path. Monk was right. This was too much of a coincidence. Did they rely on luck to get here? That's scary. What kind of monster is that? However, since that was the case, he would just follow them. The people of wide prosperity heaven all thought this way. This would save them some time. After passing through several forks in the road, Xu Yaring's group of 7 followed closely behind Ling Han's group of 4, enjoying the fruits of their labor. Hey, why are you guys always following us? Hunyo was displeased. It's not like this road was opened by your family. Could it be that you can't let others use it? An emperor said. Naturally, he wasn't willing to admit that they had taken advantage of others. Sure. Ling Han nodded. When he came to the next fork, he stopped and said, after you. Xu Yaring's group of 7 looked at each other in dismay. What after? But they naturally had no reason to admit defeat. They ignored him and began to make calculations there. Ling Han scoffed and set off. When Xu Yaring's group of 7 saw this, they hurriedly followed, not blushing at all. Too shameless, Hunyo cried out. Ling Han smiled and said to Hunyo, don't be in a hurry, it's mine. When they came to the next fork, Ling Han suddenly grabbed the Empress and the others, and then used his movement technique. They actually turned into 4 shadows, each sprinting towards a fork. Ah! Xu Yaring's group of 7 instantly stopped, not knowing which figure to follow. How could it be? Ling Han was only a 5th severance. Though his cultivation level was comparable to Yang Soul, his battle prowess crushing Yin Soul, and he could even just barely touch Earth Soul. He wasn't in the dividing soul tier after all. Only dividing soul tier could separate his divine sense and form a clone, making it impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. Too strange. Yet they didn't know that Ling Han used the power of time of the Black Tower to accelerate himself. In the instant that the other arrived, it was only an ordinary instant, but Ling Han had a few hundred times more time, separately sprinting on the 4 forked roads, as if he had 3 extra bodies. What to do? Split them up. But what if Ling Han came again? The 7 of them were split into 4 groups, and each group had less than 2 people left, so how could they split them up next time? Forget it. We'd better make our own calculations. They obediently began to think on their own. Ahead, Ling Han showed a smile, playing with him. After walking for another dozen or so days, the path ahead suddenly opened up. There were no more countless forks, only a broad road, and at the end was a majestic palace. The 4 of them walked over, but discovered that this palace only existed in name, leaving only an empty shell. Furthermore, it was tattered everywhere. In the past, this was a magnificent building, astonishingly huge, but now, not even a single weed grew, leaving only bare stones. In a massive plaza, there was a gigantic stone tablet, densely covered with all kinds of characters. A short man was currently standing in front of the stone tablet. His hair was white, and he was looking up at this stone tablet, his expression slightly focused. However, when Ling Han and the others appeared, this man immediately turned around. Who else could it be but Tang Minglong? He didn't go to the mountain peak on the left, but directly came here. If Ling Han knew that he had once fought with Ji Wuming, he would guess that he didn't go to the left peak because of Ji Wuming, but now he was a little curious as to why he had come here first. One had to know that entering from the entrance was actually the closest to the left peak. Though the middle peak was in the middle of the valley, it didn't directly face the path into the valley. I really didn't think that you guys would actually be the first to arrive here, Tang Minglong said ruefully. He clearly knew Xu Yaring's background. A reincarnated celestial king actually couldn't compare to a few juniors, which surprised him. Ling Han smiled calmly and didn't pay him any attention. If others didn't offend him, he couldn't be bothered to deal with them. He walked over and then approached the stone tablet. Heaven extinguishing 9 swords. Immediately, 4 large characters rushed out from the stone tablet, turning into 4 rays of light. No, 4 rays of sword qi, slashing towards Ling Han. Peng! Ling Han raised his arm to block. Ji! His whole body was pushed back by the sword qi. Tung tung tung! He retreated several hundred steps before he stopped. Here, the characters on the stone tablet instantly became blurry, and only the characters written on it could be seen. Heaven extinguishing 9 swords, Ling Han stood still and revealed a smile. Does it mean that if I can't stand close, I don't have the right to practice the sword technique? Chapter 1981. The Empress Hunyou and Yan Xianlu also looked eager. Prodigies were never willing to admit defeat. Ling Han also released Bewitching Maiden Ro, and the 5 of them all walked towards that stone tablet. Wang's sword light came again. This time, Ling Han was prepared. He immediately shook his right hand and charged towards these sword lights instead of passively defending. And with Ling Han as a lesson, the Empress and the others were similarly prepared and raised their hands to shoot out extremely powerful celestial techniques. Pung 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 pung. A dazzling light streaked past, and the first round of attacks from the stone tablet passed. Even if everyone was prepared, they were still pushed back very, very far. Not one of them could advance without retreating. This sword light was very sharp. However, they were similarly pushed back, and the number of steps each person retreated was different. For example, Ling Han retreated the least. This time, it was more than 200 steps. Next was Hunyou, who retreated more than 10 steps. Next was the Empress, who retreated another 7 steps. Then was Yan Xianlu, who fell behind another 20 steps. Last was Bewitching Maiden Ro, who retreated more than 600 steps. Ling Han had retreated the least, because he had already faced the attack once. If he did not count, the comparison of everyone's strength was clear at a glance. Again, Hunyou called out excitedly, and shot out with a large stride. Ling Han and the others also charged forward again. Pung pung pung. After each charge, everyone would be forced back. But for those like Ling Han, Hunyou, and the Empress, the number of steps they were forced back became fewer and fewer, which also meant that after each charge, they would be able to advance a few steps further than before. Yan Xianlu and Bewitching Maiden Ro were also advancing, but their speed was slower, especially Bewitching Maiden Ro, who was ridiculously slow. Tang Minglong saw this, and involuntarily stroked his beard. The wrinkles all over his head smoothed out, as if he was incredibly gratified. This old man's bitter struggle was not in vain, and I have used up quite a few of that person's trump cards. When these youngsters grow up, they will definitely be the main force in resisting the tide of darkness, he thought. He said in his heart, and suddenly pressed his hand on his chest. His body trembled, and his face instantly became incomparably pale. Blood actually flowed from the gaps between his fingers. Even if we have reincarnated, and both of us have reached the fifth severance, the gap between me and that person is actually still so large. I didn't expect that I would die here instead of fighting against the tide of darkness. That's good too. Returning to my hometown, this old man can also smile. Moreover, as long as these people can grow up, it doesn't matter even if this old man dies. Didn't I fight in that place for countless years to protect this homeland? He turned around, not letting Ling Han and the others see his current miserable state. His figure soared up and soon disappeared without a trace. Just as Ji Wuming had said, it was impossible for Tang Minglong to kill him. If he wanted to kill Tang Minglong, all he had to do was use a trump card. However, it was clear that Wuming Ji had also miscalculated. He had used more than one trump card. This was also because Ji Wuming had clearly known that Ling Han had a rare treasure, but had not made a move previously. He had used up too many trump cards, so it was impossible for him to defeat Ling Han. It was not that he had been lenient. Ling Han swept a glance over, and couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Tang Minglong had left just like that. He didn't know what else had happened in the meantime. He only thought that Tang Minglong had come early, and had already learned this sword technique, so he did not take it to heart. If others did not come to provoke him, he had no interest in provoking others either. His attention returned to the stone tablet, and Ling Han strode forward. Xiao xiao xiao. Sword light attacked again. Ling Han humphed, and stretched out his right hand, using the regulations of slaughter to resist. Pung 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 pung. In the fierce resistance he was forced back, but after only retreating 7 steps, Ling Han steadied himself, and then launched a powerful counterattack. Step by step, he resolutely advanced. He was already able to completely resist the power of the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, or at least the power of these 4 words. This sword technique was created with the regulations of slaughter as its foundation. It was extremely powerful, and Ling Han was delighted. This was because he had now grasped a large amount of regulations of slaughter, and he had also obtained this piece of the true explanation of the Great Tao. In the future, he would be able to grasp the regulations of slaughter to an extremely fine level. Then, when combined with the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, it would be enough to completely release the power of the regulations of slaughter. Moreover, Ling Han carefully experienced it. Just the 4 words, heaven annihilating 9 swords, allowed him to taste the powerful sword intent, as well as the usage of regulations of slaughter. He faintly felt that he too could wield this kind of sword technique. He immediately understood. The words on the stone tablet were not for people to comprehend, but to directly transform into attacks to battle with others, allowing people to comprehend the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords in battle. If one's strength was insufficient and could only wander around the periphery, then the only thing that could be comprehended was the 4 words, heaven-extinguishing 9 swords. Interesting. Then let's see how powerful the next sword technique is. Ling Han took a step forward, and this time, the second row of characters on the stone tablet lit up. Xiao, xiao xiao. They transformed into 7 killing swords that attacked. Each of them was filled with a murderous aura, as if they had consumed fresh blood. He moved to parry the attack, but did not use the power of the Black Tower. Instead, he used his own strength to resist. Ding 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 ding. The crisp sounds rang out incessantly. In the midst of the resistance, sword light soared into the sky, tearing apart the clouds as if it could shake the 9 heavens. Ling Han was forced back again. This was only the second row of characters, but their might had increased by a few times. This caused him to misjudge, and he was forced back. Haha again, Ling Han said in his mind. He advanced again. Hong, his whole body was ignited with flames, and he had already activated the power of his divine fetus, increasing his battle prowess by a large margin. Wang, the killing swords trembled slightly as if they had been angered, and slashed endlessly. Ling Han resisted, and with the 9 heavens flame entangling him, he was like an inextinguishable god. When he punched out, he could set the whole heaven and earth ablaze, his might domineering. He was ferocious, but the heaven-annihilating 9 swords were not weak, either, starting a fierce battle with him. Boom boom boom. This was a different kind of battle. For a moment, It was impossible to determine who was stronger or weaker. There was only a terrifying light soaring into the skies, and there were continuous explosions. Symbols of great Tao were continuously forming and exploding, their destructive power astonishing. After fighting for about 7 days, Ling Han finally gained the upper hand. He advanced step by step, forcing the killing swords back. But when he advanced to a certain limit, the second row of characters dimmed, but the third row of characters did not light up. It was as if the stone tablet had malfunctioned. What was going on? In the great battle of celestial kings all those years ago, even this stone tablet that inherited the heaven-annihilating 9 swords was destroyed. Ling Han propped up his chin and thought for a while. It was Hun Yo and the others again. Now, Hun Yo and the Empress had also entered the second area, and were resisting the second row of killing swords. One used the secret technique of the rock, and the other used all 9 doppelgangers. Yin Xianlu was still in the first area, but he was about to charge over. Bewitching Maiden Row was far behind, practically making no progress. An idea suddenly occurred to Ling Han. He retreated, and then advanced again. Xiao xiao xiao. The killing swords appeared, and slashed towards him, their murderous aura boiling. He drew out the divine demon sword, and began to use the sword technique that he had learned previously, which was the first style of the heaven-annihilating 9 swords. There was a change. Ling Han immediately discovered that though the killing swords were still very powerful, it seemed as if their hostility towards him had suddenly disappeared, and had become slightly gentle. Chapter 1982. Ling Han instantly came to a realization. This stone tablet indeed had the effect of passing down an inheritance, and its purpose was to teach others the heaven-destroying 9 swords. But why didn't the third row of characters light up after passing through the second area? Because they were teaching the heaven-destroying 9 swords. So what was the point of not using the heaven-destroying 9 swords to resist? Thus, when Ling Han used the heaven-destroying 9 swords now, even the killing swords in the second row became much gentler, as if a teacher was guiding his students. No matter how fierce the teacher was, it was only strict. Ling Han understood, and said to the Empress and Hun Yo, "Use the heaven-destroying 9 swords that you've just learned to resist." The 2 women were smart, and added with their absolute trust in Ling Han, they immediately changed their pattern of attack. However, this was a sword technique that he had just learned, so how strong could its might be? Even if the killing sword had become slightly gentler, it still forced Ling Han and the others into a retreat. Ling Han was unmoved. He was just practicing the first style of the heaven-destroying 9 swords in his mind, and the divine demon sword in his hand was also used. As he was forced back step by step, his grasp of the heaven-destroying 9 swords became more and more proficient. In fact, sometimes he would even retreat and enter into the Black Tower, comprehending for a while under the reincarnation tree before coming out. He was like this, and so were the Empress and Hun Yo. Another 7 days later, they passed through the second area almost at the same time. Wang, Wang, Wang. The third row of characters lit up, and intertwined to form 3 human figures, each holding a sword in their hands. There was no nonsense, and of course no nonsense. These 3 human figures charged over, brandishing their swords and slashing. True enough, this was the correct way to open. Ling Han laughed loudly. The divine demon sword shook, and he similarly parried the attack with the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Ding ding ding, the 2 swords clashed. It was clearly only a shadow, yet a crisp sound rang out. This was a collision of great Tao earth-shattering. The resistance was incredibly intense. Ling Han and the others were the same as before. They fought and stopped, and occasionally entered into the Black Tower to comprehend. A day of meditation was equivalent to 100 years of bitter contemplation, and added with their intelligence, they naturally advanced at a rapid pace. When they advanced into the 5th area, Yin Xianlu had just entered the 2nd area. And there was no need to mention bewitching Maiden Row. She was still pacing back and forth in the same place, unable to advance an inch. This was the difference. Ling Han occasionally glanced back, and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Bewitching Maiden Row had originally been a king tier, and with the help of the heavenly Tao Jade, she had completed her path of cultivation, and advanced into the ranks of emperor tiers. Moreover, she was a top-notch emperor tier. However, a top-notch emperor was actually not qualified to practice the 9 heaven-extinguishing swords at most. He would only be able to comprehend the first style. Back then, the celestial king who created this sword technique must have been extremely proud and arrogant. He believed that his sword technique could only be inherited by emperors. The rest of his descendants were mediocre, and he would rather it be lost than pass it on. In addition, this young man was definitely a peak-stage immortal king at the 7th, 8th, or 9th level. Ling Han was even more shocked in his heart. Just by his arrival, there were already several celestial kings who had reincarnated. In other words, the probability of celestial kings dying was still quite high. This was completely different from the celestial realm he knew. Immortal kings were supposed to be immortal. He suppressed the doubts in his heart. Right now, the most important thing was to learn this sword technique, and his questions would eventually be answered as he improved his realm. The further they advanced, the stronger the battle prowess of the human figures formed by the stone tablet symbols. This also increased the difficulty of learning the 9 heaven-extinguishing swords. When they reached the 3rd year, Ling Han suddenly stopped and turned back. Xu Yaring and the other 6 had arrived. They had finally completed their calculations and found the correct path. Unfortunately, just a few forks in the road had caused them to waste more than 2 years' time. The disparity was too great. This also showed how powerful the reincarnation tree was. The source power of heaven and earth was just that awesome. When it was Ling Han's turn, Xu Yaring and the other 6 all revealed expressions of anger. If they had been able to follow Ling Han, they could have arrived here 2 years ago. Was there a need to waste time for nothing? He was merely leading the way. What did he lose? Was there a need to be so petty? They were all thinking from their own point of view. Instead, they felt aggrieved. However, they didn't think about why Ling Han was leading them. Leaving aside the fact that they were fighting for treasures in the mystery realm, even if they were outside, they would still have to thank him for pointing the way, right? Ling Han smiled calmly, having no interest in paying them any heed. Xu Yaring and the other 6 naturally discovered this stone tablet and hurriedly walked over, starting a battle with the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords. Unfortunately, aside from Xu Yaring, the others had not obtained the true explanation of Great Tao of the regulations of slaughter. Asking them to learn the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords after just a few battles like this, wasn't that a joke? Unless their talent had reached a heaven-defying level, there was absolutely no way that they could learn the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords so easily. But they were also unwilling. A supreme sword technique was right in front of them, so how could they miss it? Then they would continue to struggle. Ling Han withdrew his attention and continued to battle. Even though the human figures of light were ferocious, they were also very good teachers. They fully displayed the essence of the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, again and again, not getting tired of it. Another year passed. Even bewitching Maiden Row had made great progress, advancing into the 2nd level area. But aside from Xu Yaring, the others were all lingering around the 1st level, unable to advance any further. However, Xu Yaring was indeed the 2nd prodigy of the wide prosperity heaven, and was more so the reincarnation of a celestial king. She had already advanced into the 3rd level, and was on par with Yin Xianlu. At this time, Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyao had already fought for a very long time in the 8th level area. If they passed through this level, they would be able to learn the final sword of the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, and they would be perfected. Peng Ling Han was the first to pass through. As the divine demon sword slashed out, a human figure of light was forcefully torn apart by him. His whole person exuded endless murderous aura, and he stepped out. He landed in the 9th level area. However, the symbols on the 9th row did not light up. What's going on? Ling Han was surprised. He had clearly used the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords to pass through, so why was there no reaction? He looked carefully, and finally discovered that the symbols on the 9th row of the stone tablet were not complete. They had been destroyed. He took a few more glances, yet shook his head. That was not because they had been destroyed by someone, but rather because they had not been finished at all. Perhaps that celestial king had not been able to create the ninth sword. Or perhaps he had suddenly changed his mind when he had left behind the ninth sword. Without the will of the celestial king, the symbols on the ninth row were dim and lightless, and no matter how he looked at it, they were only meaningless scribbles. Ling Han could only stop. Right at this moment, there was a rumble, and this stone tablet actually collapsed. It was as if it had completed the inheritance, and it could also rest in peace. Suddenly, all the sword light and human figures disappeared. What did you do? A monarch tier of the wide prosperity heaven roared at Ling Han. His name was Ma Legong, and he was ranked 8th. What did I do? Ling Han rubbed his nose. The other had obviously blamed the collapse of the stone tablet on him. Though this was very likely to be true, it was probably due to the considerations of that celestial king. As long as someone learned the 8th sword, the stone tablet would shatter by itself. What did that have to do with him? Putting aside the fact that he did not know, even if he did he have the obligation to deliberately stop and wait for these people to learn the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords? What a joke. It's not that I'm looking down on you guys, but trash like you can't learn this sword technique at all, Ling Han said very seriously. Chapter 1984. This bolt of lightning struck very suddenly, and it was extremely powerful. Merely the aura it exuded was enough to make one shiver. At the very least, Ling Han felt that if he was struck by it, he would definitely be done for. This is a heavenly tribulation, Ling Han said. Though this bolt of lightning struck down from above their heads, it very strangely evaded all 4 of them. It was unimaginably coincidental. There was only one reason. This was a heavenly tribulation, and it only targeted specific individuals. Thus, as long as others did not actively interfere, they would not be directly struck by the heavenly tribulation, no matter how close they stood. Of course, when a heavenly tribulation descended and sent rocks flying, the heaven and earth would not be responsible if they were struck or smashed. But none of them had broken through. So why did a heavenly tribulation suddenly descend? And it was so terrifying at that. Blazing flames lightning struck tree, they said in unison. Only this strange tree would constantly encounter calamities. It would either be burned by fire or struck by lightning. Thus, now that a heavenly tribulation had suddenly appeared, there was a 99% chance that the progenitor tree had been struck by lightning again. Just now it was just an aftershock that had swept past. Now that you mention it, they raised their heads, but could only see a field of clouds and mist. Ling Han took a deep breath and gathered all the power in his body. He drew out his divine demon sword and swung it at the sky. Hong! A sword light sliced through the air, a murderous aura rampaging. The clouds and mist were forcibly swept away, revealing a clear sky. Then, as if these clouds and mist had a life of their own, they rapidly wriggled and merged together, causing the valley to return to a gray and hazy state. But just this one instant was enough for Ling Han and the others to understand. In the sky, there was an indescribably huge tree, and they were right under its crown. No wonder there would be a heavenly tribulation striking down. They were right under the blazing flames lightning-struck tree. This was really the darkest place under the light, and they were looking for a target under the blazing flames lightning-struck tree. Based on the shape of the crown, the direction of the main trunk should be there, Ling Han said, pointing in a direction. Let's go. The 4 of them walked in that direction for 7 days, before a pitch-black wall appeared in front of them. Standing next to the wall, one would find that the wall was not completely flat. Instead, it was curved. Overall, it should be a circular wall structure. However, it was so big that it felt like it was flat. This is the flaming lightning strike wood. When they discovered that they were standing under the tree, they might have already been walking for a few days, but they still had to walk for another 7 days to reach the trunk of the tree. This was enough to show how huge the ancestral tree was. With such a big crown, how could the trunk be small? Ling Han stretched out his hand and pressed it against the tree trunk. Z! A blazing white lightning flashed, and pung! He was sent flying. Ling Han, are you alright? Hunyo hurriedly ran over. I'm fine. Ling Han crawled up. He said he was fine, but his body was swaying. The power of lightning on the raging flame lightning strike wood could not be underestimated. Although it was not enough to kill him, it still made his entire body tremble, and it was incomparably uncomfortable. Come, everyone come try and see who can take away the source power of heaven and earth, Ling Han said. He wanted this raging flame lightning strike wood, but he would definitely not selfishly monopolize it, and not give others a chance to try. Source power of heaven and earth was obtained by those who were fated. The Empress and the other two girls all nodded, and separated a little, facing the raging flame lightning strike wood. How to take it depended on their own methods. Moreover, the opportunity was rare. Who knew when the raging flame lightning strike would fly away? Ling Han also walked over. He channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. Since this was a heavenly venerable tier cultivation technique that stood above all other cultivation techniques, it should also have a strong attraction to the source power of heaven and earth. Wang! The four of them all lit up, and one after another, marks of great Tao appeared on their bodies, trying to resonate with the raging flame lightning strike wood and obtain its approval. The raging flame lightning strike wood did not react, just like a normal tree. No matter how much expression you made, it was all a waste of effort. The four of them did not give up. As long as the raging flame lightning strike wood was still here, they had a chance. Moreover, how could the source power of heaven and earth be so easily taken? They continued, and after a few more days, they saw that there were actually lines of glowing vein-like patterns on the trunk of the tree, densely covering the entire trunk. It was reacting. The four of them were all overjoyed, and hurriedly continued, throwing themselves into it wholeheartedly. Xiao! A cold light suddenly attacked from behind them, slicing towards the four of them. Ling Han humphed, stood up, and shot out a punch. Pung! This cold light instantly shattered, but the vein-like patterns on the raging flame lightning strike would all stopped shining, and the tree trunk trembled slightly. The ground was also trembling, as if it was about to uproot and fly away. Ling Han flew into a rage, and looked behind him, only to see 6 people standing there. Xu Yaring and the other prodigies of the wide prosperity heaven. They really were like ghosts that refused to leave, and caused the efforts of Ling Han and the others to fail at the last moment. They had even almost allowed the raging flame lightning strike would to directly flee. Ling Han was not opposed to competition, but this kind of competition made him feel very disgusted. Previously, he had exploded in fury and killed Ma Luogang, and now these people had directly stepped over his bottom line. You seek death. He charged out. Since they dared to interfere, then they had to be prepared to suffer his wrath. Boom! A pair of flaming wings materialized behind Ling Han's back, and with a flap, he had already charged in front of Xu Yaring and the others. He drew out his divine demon sword, and used the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Shua sword light blazed. Xu Yaring humphed, and waved a palm to meet the attack. The others also moved. With Xu Yaring restraining Ling Han from the front, they could rest assured and attack boldly. Is that so? Ling Han smirked coldly, and activated his fiery divine fetus. A pillar of light descended from the sky, enshrouding him within, and an indescribable might overflowed. Not good retreat. Xu Yaring hurriedly shouted, and immediately retreated. Can you escape? Ling Han smirked coldly, and the power of his divine fetus completely erupted. Boom! With him as the center, a wave of fire swept out, like a roaring fire dragon, instantly catching up to Xu Yaring and the others. This was the strongest attack of the divine fetus, and even if Ling Han could only use it once in a short period of time, its might was incredibly powerful. The wave of fire gradually subsided, and Ling Han's figure appeared. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and in front of him, there was only one person who could still stand. Of course it was Xu Yaring. However, she was also in an extremely sorry state. The majority of her clothes had been burned, revealing her snow-white skin. Her buttocks, waist, chest, and other areas were even more exposed. Yet there were a series of symbols flickering on her skin, as if they were clothes that covered her body. She was panting heavily, and a majority of her beautiful hair had been burned. Her graceful and luxurious appearance had completely disappeared, and she appeared extremely disheveled. The other 5 had all been killed. Xu Yaring raised her head to the sky and howled, her beautiful face filled with fury. The wide prosperity heaven had originally been full of talents, but they had first been swallowed alive by Ji Wuming, and then killed by Ling Han. Almost all of them had been killed, and this caused her to be extremely furious. This was the death of the wide prosperity heaven, and who knew how many years it would take for it to recover? Ignorant junior, you actually don't care about the bigger picture, Xu Yaring said sinisterly. In her opinion, everything had to be focused on resisting the tide of darkness. Thus, not a single one of the supreme geniuses could die, and it would be best if all of them could become ninth heaven celestial kings. Ling Han slaughtered these geniuses, which was equivalent to slaughtering the future of the celestial realm, and this caused her killing intent to be uncontrollable. Chapter 1985. Ling Han's expression was calm, and he said, "You all can provoke me, but you don't allow me to retaliate. One cannot have such double standards as a person. If you want to fight, then come." Xu Yaring gave a battle cry and charged over. She drew out an ancient bronze mirror and shone it at Ling Han. Suddenly, a figure walked out from the mirror. Shockingly, this figure looked exactly the same as Ling Han, and there was even no difference in their aura. "Die!" This figure roared in fury and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han and this person exchanged a punch, and they both instantly retreated. They actually both retreated 17 steps. They were evenly matched, and neither had the upper hand. Ling Han showed an expression of surprise. This figure looked exactly the same as him, and his abilities were actually exactly the same as well. A reincarnated celestial king was indeed capable. Xu Yaring gave a battle cry and charged towards Ling Han. That figure also did the same, and joined forces with her to attack Ling Han. In an instant, Ling Han suffered the combined attacks of two great elites, and the situation immediately became precarious. I don't believe that a mere divine tool could actually completely imitate my abilities. Ling Han drew out his divine demon sword. He wanted to see if this figure could also draw one. True enough, this figure did not draw out his sword, but his actions were similar to Ling Han's. Using his fingers as a sword, he slashed out at Ling Han. Pung pung pung. Ling Han exchanged blows with two great elites. There was no need to mention Xu Yaring. She was the second strongest elite of the younger generation of the wide prosperity heaven, and her previous self had also been a seventh heaven celestial king, so her abilities were naturally powerful. And that figure's battle prowess was similar to Ling Han's, as if the heaven and earth had copied him, though the techniques he used were slightly different. When these two people joined forces, their might was tremendous. If it was someone like Yin Xianlu, he would probably be crushed in a single exchange. However, Ling Han's physique was just too tyrannical. Even though the two of them had both reached the peak of the Ghost Soul stage, and vaguely had the power of the Earth Soul stage, when they landed on Ling Han's body, they only caused him to bleed a little. They didn't even break a single bone, so how could they injure him? "Let's fight, let's fight, let's fight." Ling Han laughed heartily. Even if he had to fight one against two, he wasn't afraid at all. He displayed the 9 heaven annihilation swords. If this figure could even imitate such a sword technique, then it would be truly astonishing. It meant that Xu Yaring could completely obtain the 9 heaven annihilation sword's immortal technique through this figure. Although that figure was brandishing his sword, it was not the heaven extinguishing 9 swords. However, its power was not to be underestimated. Ling Han laughed. True enough, this was only a precious tool. Though it was extraordinary, it could only imitate his form. It was impossible for a god to imitate it. He drew on the power of the Black Tower. Boom! The regulations of slaughter were activated, and together with the Heaven Annihilation 9 swords, he slashed madly at Xu Yaring. Drawing on the Black Tower, the might of this strike was naturally indescribably powerful. Presently, the strongest ability of the Black Tower was the ability to stop time. If it could be effective even against celestial kings, then Ling Han would be able to kill celestial kings now. Of course, this might be effective, but the time might be so short that even ascending origin tiers wouldn't be able to detect it. It would be fleeting. And following that, the regulations of space and slaughter were also incredibly powerful. More importantly, the regulations of slaughter and the Heaven Annihilation 9 swords were of the same source. Thus, the might of this strike was infinitely strengthened. Shua. The sword swept out as if it could destroy the heaven and earth. Xu Yaring's expression involuntarily changed. The might of this strike made even her heart palpitate. She used her full power and clashed with Ling Han. Boom, boom, boom. The two supreme monarch tiers engaged in a fierce battle, and it was difficult to determine who was superior in the short term. Ling Han was very sure that if they continued to fight like this, the final victor would definitely be him. Because his physique was too tough, he was already standing in an invincible position without fighting. Xu Yaring also sensed this. In such a fierce battle, she was continuously wounded, but though Ling Han was also struck by her and the illusory figures, he was practically unscathed. He only suffered some superficial wounds, which were not painful at all. Though this was still far from the point where she would lose her battle prowess, she was very clear that if this continued, she would definitely be in trouble. It might be half a year later, or it might be 5 or 6 years later. She gritted her teeth and suddenly turned to leave. There was no point in fighting anymore. She would wait until she advanced into the dividing soul tier before killing Ling Han. She was filled with confidence about this. Because she had been a celestial king in her last life, she would be able to grasp astonishing battle prowess the moment she advanced into the dividing soul tier. It was definitely not something that a newly advanced dividing soul tier could compare to. She would let this person live for a few more days. She was incredibly decisive, and left as soon as she said she would, without any hesitation. She didn't want the blazing flames lightning struck wood, of course she wanted it. But it didn't have to be here. This ancestral tree was incredibly massive, and it could be collected anywhere. Previously, she had come here completely by coincidence, but she had also interrupted Ling Han and the others. Otherwise, it was really possible that this ancestral tree would have already been collected. Ling Han chased after her for a few steps, and then stopped. His defenses were definitely invincible among those of the same cultivation level. But in terms of battle prowess, that might not be the case, especially in terms of speed. She had been a celestial king in her last life, and had grasped a frightening number of celestial techniques. At least in the aspect of escape, she was very strong. It was not easy for a celestial king to attain Tao, so the most important thing had to be to protect oneself. So it was understandable that she had to work hard on her movement techniques. Come, let's continue, Ling Han said smilingly. Bewitching Maiden Rose's eyes were filled with admiration. This man was really too extraordinary. In the beginning, he could only reign supreme among king tiers, but very soon, he was invincible among emperor tiers. And even Yin Xianlu, the publicly acknowledged number 1 elite of the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, could not compare to him. And now, he was even more awesome. The second prodigy of the wide prosperity heaven could only flee in defeat against Ling Han. This kind of man, furthermore, was extremely good to her. The heavenly Tao Jade. What kind of divine object was that? It had forcibly raised her from king tier to emperor tier. Who else in this world could be so generous? Great bewitching woman, don't have any improper thoughts. Ling Han is Niu's. Hu Niu gritted her teeth. How could these women be so shameless? She had only left for a few short years, and they had already taken advantage of the situation to latch onto Ling Han. Damn it, really damn it. Let's continue, Ling Han said. He guessed that Xu Yaring would definitely not give up easily, and would definitely change to another place to attempt to collect the fiery flame lightning strike wood. She had a very high chance of success, because she was the reincarnation of a celestial king. Her intrinsic quality was not inferior to the fiery flame lightning strike wood. In fact, it was not impossible that she was slightly stronger. Thus, they definitely could not lower their guard. They had to collect the fiery flame lightning strike wood as soon as possible. As long as this treasure did not end up in their pockets, they could not be careless for even a moment. The 4 of them once again sat down in a cross-legged position and circulated their own cultivation techniques. They completely released their abilities and bloodline, attempting to attract the fiery flame lightning strike wood. Day after day passed, but this time, the fiery flame lightning strike wood did not have any reaction at all. It was as if after being teased once, its appetite had also been whetted. It was not something that could be hooked in just a few tries. Ling Han and the others were not discouraged. Since they had already experienced close to success once, they naturally could not possibly give up at this time. 10 days, 1 month, 3 months. Time passed very quickly, and when it was about to be 100 days, multiple patterns finally appeared on the body of the fiery flame lightning strike wood again. Who had drawn it? Cell phone reading is even more refreshing. Chapter 1986. Ling Han and the other 3 were surrounded by immortal light. They were all divine fetuses, but their attributes were different, and they were all very powerful. When they activated their full power, they completely released the power of their divine fetuses to attract the source energy of heaven and earth. To be acknowledged by the source energy of the heavens and earth, one had to be a celestial king, at the very least. The immortal fetus was the bloodline of an immortal king returning to its ancestral roots. Only Ling Han was different. Although he had also activated the power of his divine fetus, his true trump card was still the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. This was a celestial venerable tier-level cultivation technique that was superior to celestial king tier-level cultivation techniques. The vein-like patterns on the blazing flame lightning tree's body grew brighter and brighter, and there were even more strands of immortal light coiling around it, causing the entire tree to become incomparably magnificent, appearing in this misty land. Who was it that triggered the progenitor tree? Wang. The blazing flame lightning strike tree trembled slightly, and suddenly, its trunk began to shrink, turning wood into seedlings. What does that mean? The progenitor tree had decided to recognize someone as its master. Who is it? Xiao. The blazing flame lightning strike tree suddenly rose from the ground. It was no more than 3 inches tall, but it was sparkling and translucent. Every leaf carried blazing flame and lightning, creating a myriad of scenes. What caused Ling Han and the other 3's expressions to change was that the flaming lightning struck wood was slowly flying away from them. Xu Yaring? This woman was indeed not to be underestimated. She had actually drawn out the heaven and earth ancestor tree when she had the chance to act. However, the flaming lightning strike wood was clearly still hesitating. Otherwise, it would have flown straight to Xu Yaring instead of hesitating here. There was still hope. In fact, this was the real battle. Ling Han and the other 3 continued to attract the flaming lightning strike wood. They had to lure it back no matter what. As expected, the flaming lightning struck wood quickly stopped and flew towards Ling Han and the others. Come on, come on. However, good things didn't last long. After a while, the flaming lightning strike wood stopped and flew in the opposite direction. Xu Yaring also noticed that something was wrong, so she increased the intensity of her seduction. As expected of a former celestial king, he was able to fight against the 4 of them by himself. Ling Han opened up his spirit. Hong, the concept of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll was fully unleashed, turning into an ocean that enveloped the fiery flames and lightning-struck wood. The raging flame lightning tree shook violently, and then flew towards Ling Han with a whoosh. When it arrived in front of him, the progenitor tree turned into a shooting star and entered the space between Ling Han's eyebrows. Then, the symbol of a sapling appeared on the top of his head, but it immediately disappeared. The fight finally came to an end, and Ling Han was the final victor. There was nothing that could be done. The indestructible Heaven Scroll was too powerful. This was a Heaven Venerable tier-level cultivation technique, and in terms of quality, there were few that could rival it in this world. If it wasn't for the fact that Xu Yaring had once been a celestial king, and had countless tricks up her sleeve, as well as the likes of a celestial king, she wouldn't have been able to fight a tug-of-war with Ling Han at all. She wouldn't even have the chance to interfere. A furious roar came from afar. That was Xu Yaring. She had thought that she could obtain the flaming lightning strike wood, but all her efforts were in vain. She indeed had a reason to be unwilling, because as long as Ling Han wasn't here, she would be able to take away this progenitor tree without any suspense. In Ling Han's Dantian, a 3rd source power had appeared, and this also caused a fundamental change in the competition between the 2 powers and the source power of lightning. The heaven and earth progenitor tree was naturally no weaker than the Xianing source water and nine heavens flame, so it was only natural that it would occupy a spot. But how could the two great source powers be willing to give up their spots so easily? Naturally, a struggle was unavoidable. The three source powers fought fiercely, and in the end, the world was divided into three, with each obtaining one. The source power of lightning found a sliver of its existence in the cracks, and occupied less than 3 to 4% of the Dantian world's territory. Its situation became more and more miserable. And this was still not the worst of it. As Ling Han's grasp over the regulations of slaughter, time, and space became deeper and deeper, and gradually formed source power, the space that the source power of lightning occupied would be further compressed. Ling Han stretched out his left hand, and with a thought, the symbol of that sapling immediately appeared on his forehead. Then, a mysterious power surged over, and flashes of green light entwined around his hand, endless vitality spreading out. This was the source power that the flaming lightning strike would have transformed into, and it bestowed him with a powerful recovery ability. Although this progenitor tree was always struck by lightning and burned by fire, it was precisely because of this that it could never die, and its vitality was so exuberant. Not only could it heal its own injuries, it could also be used on others. Ling Han also had a kind of understanding. This was not just an effect on its own, but could also be used in conjunction with the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to further increase his recovery ability. The indestructible Heaven's Scroll was also created with reference to the cultivation techniques of various immortal beasts, and then fused with the comprehension of a heavenly venerable. Thus, the source power of heaven and earth could naturally increase its might. This Heaven's Scroll was inclined towards defense and recovery, so the source power of wood that he had obtained now could have unexpected effects. If Ling Han obtained the source power of earth in the future, then it would definitely increase his defense ability. Ling Han, you're so awesome. Only at the 5th severance, and you already possess 3 source powers of heaven and earth. Hunyao said excitedly, not at all disappointed that she had not obtained the source power of heaven and earth. On the other side, the Empress was also smiling, only feeling happy for Ling Han. If it was the Empress or Hunyao who obtained this source power of heaven and earth, then Ling Han would also feel happy for them, and would not feel the slightest bit of jealousy. This was a family. Of course, whether the Empress and Hunyao would feel happy for the other was another matter. It would probably be quite difficult. Though bewitching Maiden Ro felt that it was a bit of a pity, she surprisingly discovered that she actually did not feel much jealousy, which made her sigh internally. She probably really had fallen in love with this enemy. Otherwise, she would also be jealous no matter what, right? We can finally go back. Once this thought rose up, they became incredibly eager, and began to rush out of the valley. Even though they'd spent over 80 years to arrive here, most of that time had been spent on comprehending the quintessence of the Grand Tao and the 9 heaven annihilation swords. Thus, the time required to leave was much shorter, and it merely took a little over 3 months to arrive near the entrance of the gorge. This time, so many prodigies have died. If the news spreads, it will probably cause a huge uproar, Ling Han said with some emotion. First, a large wave had been killed by Ji Wuming, and then 6 had been killed by Ling Han. By now, there should only be 5 or 6 monarch tiers in the wide prosperity heaven, which was not much stronger than the calm peace heaven. Furthermore, one had to take into account that there were a few reincarnations of celestial kings among the monarch tiers of the wide prosperity heaven, and the number of prodigies that had truly reached monarch tier by themselves was pitifully few. This was a huge blow, and it was unknown how many years it would take for the wide prosperity heaven to recover. Chapter 1988. Master, hasn't the 3 lives pill been lost? Ling Han asked. This was the biggest problem. Since the pill recipe had been lost, how could one study it, much less refine it? Indeed, alchemist Ziqing nodded and said, this pill recipe has been lost for a long time, but I've recently obtained it again. Ha 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 ha. The old man laughed very happily. To an alchemy grandmaster, recovering a lost pill formula was like earning a few 100 million star stones. Congratulations, master, Ling Han said with a smile. He was happy for his master. Alchemist Zicheng continued. However, this is not due to my efforts. Rather, it's a gift from the Western Celestial Realm to Alchemy City. Oh, the Western Celestial Realm? Ling Han was slightly surprised. Aside from Hu Niu, this was the first time he had heard of someone from the Western Celestial Realm. As expected of the Western Celestial Realm, not only is their level of martial art superior to the Eastern Celestial Realm, but their alchemy is also superior to ours. Alchemist Zicheng sighed ruefully and said, they offered 3 lost pill recipes right off the bat. I really couldn't refuse. Refuse what? Ling Han asked. They didn't give it for free. They wanted to exchange it for a pill recipe. Alchemist Zicheng said with a smile. 3 for 1. How could I refuse such a deal? Sure enough, the old man was a businessman through and through. Master has already fully grasped the pill recipe? Ling Han was a little curious. To say nothing of a 4-star pill recipe, even grasping a 1-star pill recipe required a long time. Alchemist Zicheng should have obtained this pill recipe not long ago, right? It's about time. As for the others, I'll refine them as I improve them. Alchemist Zicheng waved his hand, appearing to be indifferent. Damn! A single failure would waste a large amount of precious ingredients. This was enough to make a 3-star alchemist's heart ache, but the old man didn't care at all. As expected of a tycoon, Ling Han nodded. He naturally had to use the money he earned. Otherwise he would be a miser. What was the point of living without giving a single cent? Come and help me, Alchemist Zicheng said. The master and disciple pair began to concoct alchemical pills. Ling Han acted as an assistant, mainly because he wanted to observe Grandmaster Zicheng's techniques. After all, he was now a 3-star alchemist, and had even reached the 4th refinement. This was also why Grandmaster Zicheng had insisted on starting even though he clearly did not have full confidence in concocting alchemical pills. He wasn't burning it for the tycoon. His main purpose was to set an example for Ling Han. Ling Han didn't need to learn Grandmaster Zicheng's techniques. What he needed was inspiration to ignite his own spark. After a year, the master and disciple finally stopped. Under the acceleration of time, 100 years had already passed. Grandmaster Zicheng still had not been able to concoct the 3 lives pill, but Ling Han had benefited greatly. This did not allow him to step into the level of the 5th refinement, but his attainments in the 4th refinement had increased considerably, advancing into the level of perfection. This meant that he was much closer to the threshold of the 5th refinement. Right, there's one more thing, Grandmaster Zicheng said. In another 50 years, the Western Celestial Realm will hold a grand event of alchemy. I have decided to send you there. Firstly, you are my disciple, and secondly, you are the future chairperson of Alchemy City. So it is time for you to go to the Western Celestial Realm. Ling Han nodded and said, just as well. I will first break through to the dividing soul tier during this time. The opening of the Sun Soul Sea is close at hand, and that emissary from the Western Celestial Realm just so happens to be going to break through to the dividing soul tier, so I have specially sent him on a trip. Otherwise, it would be at least 700,000 years before the Sun Soul Sea of the Western Celestial Realm opens, Grandmaster Zicheng said. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked, Master, who is this emissary? A young man called Ma Tongguang. He has only cultivated for 900,000 years, and is already a 3-star alchemist. He is very extraordinary, Grandmaster Zicheng said, a hint of admiration in his eyes. There was a hint of admiration in his eyes. As expected of a prodigy nurtured by the Western Celestial Realm, Ling Han couldn't help but nod. Adding in the years that he had spent in the time cultivation chamber, he was not young anymore. A 900,000-year-old 3-star alchemist, and one that was about to break through to the dividing soul tier, was indeed astonishing. Let's go and meet him. Grandmaster Zicheng looked at his beloved disciple happily. This disciple really did not disappoint him. Whether it was in terms of martial art or alchemy, he was not inferior to the prodigies of the Western Celestial Realm, which made him feel sincerely gratified. Ling Han nodded, and after bidding farewell to Grandmaster Zicheng, he went to the VIP residence on the 4th level. This place was specially used to entertain ascending origin tier mighty figures. Ma Tongguang's level was indeed not high enough, but he was presently the alchemy representative of the Western Celestial Realm, so he had the right to stay in the VIP residence on the 4th level. Once he entered, Ling Han discovered that this place was bustling with activity. Heavens, there was a sea of people, and it was about to burst. Holy Sun, Lord Holy Sun! When it was Ling Han's turn, a person at the side was first startled, and then hurriedly bowed respectfully, though it was already confirmed that Ling Han was the future chairperson of Alchemy City. As long as Grandmaster Zicheng did not abdicate, Ling Han could only be a Holy Sun. However, previously, there had been 10 Holy Sons, and now there was only Ling Han, a single seedling, who wouldn't be respectful in front of the future Peak Master. In reality, there were a great many people in Alchemy City that wanted to curry favor with Ling Han. But Ling Han was either concocting alchemical pills or had run off to train, so they did not have the chance. Ling Han nodded, smiled, and said, "Is everyone lined up to wait for that Ma Tongguang summons?" That person immediately blushed, appearing to be stammering. Just as Ling Han had said, everyone had come here to receive Ma Tongguang's summons, naturally for the sake of getting close to Ma Tongguang. That was an envoy of the Western Celestial Realm, and more so a prodigy of alchemy. If they could use him to curry favor and introduce them, they would be able to develop in the Western Celestial Realm in future. The level of martial art in the Western Celestial Realm was clearly a level higher than that of the Eastern Celestial Realm. It could be said that if you could only cultivate to the severing mundane tier in the Eastern Celestial Realm, then when you went to the Western Celestial Realm, you would have an additional 30% chance of breaking through to the dividing soul tier. Thus, for the sake of a better future, everyone had come here to curry favor with Ma Tongguang. Holy Sun! Holy Sun! The others had also arrived at Ling Han's side, and hurriedly bowed to Ling Han, all slightly embarrassed. This was natural. The future chairperson was right in front of them, yet they were fawning on an outsider, their faces flushed red. "The moon is still as round as in the Western Celestial Realm," Ling Han said smilingly. Ling Han said smilingly. These words caused a great many people to lower their heads, but there were also some who did not take it seriously. Water flowed to the bottom, and people walked to the top. Wasn't this a very normal thing? When Ling Han finished saying this, he walked forwards, and the crowd moved aside. At present, in Alchemy City, those that could have a higher status than Ling Han were only the 3 4-star grandmasters. Holy Sun Ling. When he arrived in front of Ma Tongguang's courtyard, someone stopped him at the door. Lu Xianming. He looked at Ling Han with a smile, but there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. "Do you want to request an audience with young Master Ma? Please wait here, and allow me to pass on the message." The little man was full of himself. Chapter 1989. This was Alchemy City, and Ling Han was the future chairperson of Alchemy City, yet he actually had to stand at the door and wait for someone to inform him? This was a blatant provocation. Ling Han shook his head. Originally, Lu Xianming could still be considered a talented person, but now he had actually become someone else's slave. Moreover, it was at the doorstep of his own house. This was really too embarrassing. "Lu Xianming, it was my mistake to treat you as an opponent," he said with a smile. Then his expression darkened, and he said, "What are you all crowding around here for? Go do what you should be doing." When the future chairperson spoke, who dared to ignore it? Instantly, the people in the surroundings left one after another. It was fine as long as Ling Han did not pursue the matter. Of course they had left now, but when they would return was uncertain. After all, Ling Han could not always stand guard here, could he? Lu Xianming stared at Ling Han, his gaze sinister. As far as he was concerned, it was all Ling Han's fault that he had fallen to such a state. If it were not for Ling Han's appearance, the person sitting in Ling Han's position now would be him. In his eyes, inheriting the position of Dao Pil City's chairperson was a matter of course. In fact, he did not even want to fall out with the other Holy Sons, and only passively defend it. He thought that as long as time passed, His ascension to the top would be unstoppable, and Okan and the other holy sons and holy daughters would all become his subordinates. Thus, he was unwilling to see any of them suffer losses. Power could only be manifested through talent, and the sense of achievement of ruling over prodigies would be even stronger. But everything was ruined by Ling Han. He hated it. Thankfully, a wonderful opportunity suddenly appeared now. The Holy Land of Alchemy in the Western Celestial Realm actually sent someone over, and he successfully got close to them. Then, he would follow Ma Tongguang and leave the Eastern Celestial Realm. He believed that with his talent, he would definitely surpass Ma Tongguang in a few years and prosper in the Western Celestial Realm. At that time, Ling Han would only be a small character who looked at the sky from the bottom of a well. Not only was the level of martial art in the Western Celestial Realm high, the level of alchemy was also much higher than in the Eastern Celestial Realm, and there were at least 5-star alchemists. When he became a 4-star alchemist, he would return grandly and let these people in Alchemy City know how ridiculously wrong they were. How could he not choose him as the future chair? Now it was Ling Han's turn. He couldn't help but feel jealous and provoked him on purpose. Holy Sun Ling is really aggressive. Lu Xianming suppressed the anger in his heart. Don't forget, you are not the Lord Seat Lord yet. Pei Ling Han delivered a slap. With his strength at the peak stage of the 5th severance, how could Lu Xianming possibly block it? He was instantly knocked dizzy by this slap. He finally managed to steady his feet with great difficulty, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His hair was disheveled, and he seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. Ling Han retracted his hand and said indifferently, "Don't forget that you are no longer a holy son. If you are disrespectful to me, not to mention a slap, even if I sentence you to death, no one will say anything." It was as if Lu Xianming's eyes could spit fire. But just as Ling Han had said, he was no longer a high and mighty holy son, and was only an ordinary 2-star alchemist. At most, his future would be slightly brighter, and he could basically become a 3-star alchemist. But if he wanted to become a 4-star alchemist, that was practically impossible. How could he compare with Ling Han? Even if he was slapped, he would be slapped for nothing, and there would be no one to reason with him no matter where he went. Daring to provoke the future Lord Seat Lord, shouldn't he be slapped? Hee, Holy Sun Ling has graced us with your presence, and I have failed to welcome you from afar. My apologies, my apologies. Just at this moment, there was a long laugh, and a young man in fluttering white robes walked out from the door. He was really very handsome, his hair black and thick, and his handsome eyes like the moon, exuding a moving expression. Young Master Ma. Lu Xianming hurriedly turned around and bowed towards this white-robed young man, his attitude incredibly respectful. This person was Ma Tongguang, an alchemy prodigy from the Western Celestial Realm. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said with a smile, "I am the one who has been impolite. Brother Ma has already been here for many days, and I have only just come over." The other wanted to usurp the host's position, and Ling Han naturally would not give him the chance. Ma Tongguang stared at Ling Han, the smile on his face becoming wider and wider, and he said, "The alchemy of the Eastern and Western Celestial Realm is originally one. So what is there to say that you are the guest and I am the host?" He was trying to get something out of his words. Ling Han was clear in his heart that the other said that the alchemy of the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms was one family. So there must be a head of the family, and what right did the Eastern Celestial Realm have to compare with the Western Celestial Realm? They did not even have a 5-star alchemist. Then, if Ling Han admitted that the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms were one family, then his position as Holy Son and future chairwoman of Alchemy City would not live up to his name. It was simple. Without the approval of the head of the family, what right did he have to be the chairman here? It was only a single sentence, but it laid a deep trap. This person was not simple. Ling Han chuckled and said, "All alchemists in the world are of the same path, and the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms are like two brothers. Our Eastern Celestial Realm's foundation in alchemy is weak, so we still need the help of our brothers from the Western Celestial Realm." Even blood brothers had to settle accounts clearly. What more managing each other's family affairs? so it was better to each mind their own business. After a slight pause, Ma Tongguang laughed loudly, as if he was very happy. Ling Han only smiled faintly. He couldn't be bothered to feign civility with this person. Brother Ling will probably represent Grandmaster Zicheng to attend the Alchemy Grand Meet in the Western Celestial Realm, right? Ma Tongguang suddenly changed the topic. That's right. Ling Han nodded. I have come precisely for this matter. Lu Xianming immediately showed an expression of jealousy. If it were not for Ling Han getting in the way, the person who currently possessed this position would be him. How glorious would that be, representing the entire Eastern Celestial Realm's alchemy. But now, he could only attend as Ma Tongguang's friend, and that was still putting it nicely. To put it bluntly, he would just be a follower, a lackey. Who would care about a person like him? Initially, he had been the holy son of Alchemy City, and no matter where he went, he would be surrounded by crowds. Now he had suddenly fallen from the clouds, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not get used to it. This also allowed him to understand why Okan and the others had not taken their friendship into consideration, and insisted on getting rid of him. The temptation of power was really too great. Now, if he was given a chance to get rid of Ling Han, he would fight for it at all costs. Ma Tongguang said, Brother Ling, after you arrive at the Western Celestial Realm, you will discover that the level of the Eastern Celestial Realm is really too low. Disregarding everything else, just the number of 4-star alchemists registered in our Western Celestial Realm is 3,655. The disparity between them was far too great, wasn't it? There were probably only 10 4-star alchemists in the Eastern Celestial Realm, and this was even including the few that had gone into seclusion a long time ago. It was unknown whether they were still alive or not. After all, if they did not become celestial kings, they would one day be killed by the immortals' tribulation. Over 3,600 4-star alchemists. This was far too frightening. Ling Han gave an "oh" and said, That's quite a lot. Brother Ling, though you are young and promising, the chances of you becoming a 4-star alchemist are less than 10,000. However, if you rely on me, with my help, let alone a 4-star alchemist, even becoming a 5-star alchemist is not impossible. A 5-star alchemist, an existence that was truly on equal footing with a celestial king. Chapter 1990. The jealousy in Lu Xianming's eyes deepened. A 5-star alchemist, he could only dream about it. Furthermore, in comparison, the gap between him and Ling Han was practically ridiculously large. He actively sought out Ma Tongguang and tried his best to flatter him, but Ma Tongguang still ignored him. Finally, Ma Tongguang took him in and gave him an errand similar to a doorman. Though this was somewhat humiliating, it ultimately won him a chance to go to the Western Celestial Realm. Furthermore, if others wanted to see Ma Tongguang, they also needed to report to him, and similarly had to flatter him, allowing him to find his long-lost sense of superiority. But what about Ling Han? Ma Tongguang took the initiative to invite him, and even promised him that he would definitely become a 4-star alchemist, with a sliver of hope of advancing to 5-star. This caused his hands to clench into tight fists, and even his nails dug into his flesh. He had no choice but to lower his head, or else he was afraid that he would not be able to control the flames in his eyes, and become a laughingstock for nothing. Ling Han showed an expression of understanding. Ma Tongguang had gone around in a circle, but actually still wanted to return to the original topic. Ma Tongguang wanted to obtain control over Alchemy City. As for why someone from the Western Celestial Realm would be interested in the Eastern Celestial Realm's Alchemy City, Ling Han could not guess. However, a mere 3-star alchemist actually dared to boast so shamelessly? Hee. Ling Han shook his head and said, I appreciate your kind intentions, but I have never had the habit of being someone's assistant. It was like this in the past, and it is like this now, and it will not change in the future. Ma Tongguang looked at Ling Han, the corners of his lips turning up in a smile, and he said, I believe you will definitely regret it. I only came to inform you that it's about time to set off for the Sun Soul Sea. As for other things, don't think too much about it, Ling Han said calmly. his tone already carrying dissatisfaction. Ma Tongguang nodded slowly. I am already prepared, and can set off at any time. However, I want to ask for someone from Brother Ling. N. It's this Brother Lu. Ma Tongguang pointed at Lu Xianming. Brother Lu and I hit it off right from the start, and I intend to invite you to the Western Celestial Realm as a guest. I hope that Brother Ling will allow me to do so. Ling Han could not help but smile, and said, Alchemy City has never placed chains on the feet of any alchemist. Everyone is free, and there is no need for my approval. Whether he is willing to leave with Brother Ma or not, that is his private matter, and has nothing to do with me. It's good that Brother Ling has no objections, Ma Tongguang said with a smile. Then I can rest assured. We'll depart in 10 days, Ling Han said, and then swaggered off. Young Master Ma, I was right, wasn't I? Ling Han is an extremely arrogant person. He won't accept young Master Ma's recruitment. Lu Xianming came up and acted like a villain. Ma Tongguang revealed a proud smile. Believe me, as long as I fuck someone, there is no one who won't submit to me in the end. Lu Xianming hurriedly nodded, but internally he did not agree. His understanding of Ling Han far surpassed Ma Tongguang's. If Ling Han was really so easy to buy or submit to, then it would be impossible for Ling Han to stand in such a high position now. He had no intention of reminding Ma Tongguang. Firstly, Ma Tongguang might not believe him, and secondly, he hoped that Ling Han and Ma Tongguang would fall out, and not be taken in as a subordinate. What position would that place him in? Ling Han returned to his residence, and told the Empress and the others about Ma Tongguang, causing the girls to fly into a great rage. What was he, that he actually dared to make their husband his subordinate? Niu is going to destroy him. Hu Niu rolled up her sleeves, her killing intent soaring. Ling Han pulled the little girl back. This girl was fiery, and when she said that she would kill someone, it was definitely not a joke. Even if you want to kill someone, you can't do it here, he said. Actually, he was quite mischievous. Hu Niu instantly understood. After we go to the Sun Soul Sea, we'll kill this guy. Ling Han only smiled. If Ma Tongguang was really so stubborn, and insisted on seeking death, he did not mind sending the latter on his way. However, if others did not provoke him, he would not go and kill for no reason. This was definitely not something that would make one happy. They rested for a while, and 10 days later, Ling Han went to inform Ma Tongguang that they could set out. This time, it was not only Ling Han and Ma Tongguang who were going to the Sun Soul Sea. There were also a great many people who had waited for 100 million years just for the opening of the Sun Soul Sea this time. Indeed, there were Sun Soul Seas in other places, but basically no one dared to travel such a long distance by themselves. Who knew they might die on the way? So what was the point? 100 million years was really nothing to elites at the peak stage of the severing mundane tier. They only had to endure for a little while, and the time would pass. Who could afford to wait? Unless it was those old monsters that had already lived in the severing mundane tier for hundreds of billions of years, or even trillions of years, and had suffered the pain of the immortals' tribulation. Then they would definitely be looking forward to the opening of the Sun Soul Sea at all times, giving them the hope of prolonging their lifespan. Brother Ling, we meet again. Ma Tongguang walked out with his hands clasped behind his back, and Lu Xianming followed behind him. This former holy son had his head slightly lowered, and his posture was extremely humble. He had also completely adapted to his identity, and was just a lackey. Ling Han nodded and said, "Let's set out." Ma Tongguang showed a cold smirk. He even gave orders. Did he really think that he was so great just because he was the holy son of Alchemy City? Believe it or not, he could suppress you with a single hand. Ma Tongguang could not stand the people of the Eastern Celestial Realm, not only in alchemy, but also in martial art. That was because he was not only a genius in alchemy, but also a genius in martial art. He had delivered the fifth severance, and was a monarch tier in martial arts. Monarch tiers, putting aside the fact that there were pitifully few in the Eastern Celestial Realm. Even in the Western Celestial Realm, their numbers were limited. A heaven would only have a dozen or so, and some great heaven regions would have slightly more, but at most 100. It should be known that this was the accumulation of how many years, How many generations? How many people were there in the celestial realm? In this way, they could only nurture no more than 1,000 monarch tiers. This referred to the same period, because some monarch tiers had already advanced into the dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, or even ascending origin tier, and celestial king tier. In a small place like Alchemy City, he, a fifth severance monarch tier, was naturally invincible. What severing mundane tier could withstand the might of a single strike from him? In future, you will know how wide the gap between us is. Ma Tongguang shifted his gaze, and when it swept over the Empress, Hunyou, and bewitching Maiden Ro, his pupils involuntarily contracted, revealing an expression of shock. These three women were really beautiful, the most he had seen in his life. But these three dainty beauties were actually Ling Han's women? At the same time that Ma Tongguang was shocked, he was also filled with jealousy towards Ling Han. Even if he was a dual cultivator of alchemy and martial arts, and who knew how many top-grade beauties would throw themselves at him normally, none of them could compare to any one of these three women. Coming, he had to subdue Ling Han. At that time, he only had to reveal the slightest hint of his intention, and Ling Han would take the initiative to offer the three women to him. As he thought this, a smile involuntarily rose up the corners of his lips, very vulgar. Chapter 1992. Really too shameless. In order to display a sense of superiority in front of him, he actually had someone pretend to be an admirer. This was practically no lower limit. Ma Tongguang smirked coldly. Did he think that he would believe him, just because he found someone to pretend to be him? Too foolish, too naive. He swept an eye over this actor. He was extremely young, and was only a one-star alchemist, so there was no weight to speak of at all. TSK, couldn't you find someone with some weight to act as your actor? Grandmaster Ling. Ma Tongguang had yet to finish this thought when he saw another person walk over. He was also extremely young, but the badge hanging on his chest represented his identity as a two-star alchemist. Ling Han smiled and nodded. Back then, he had held a forum to discuss Tao and explain the basics of alchemy, benefiting who knew how many people. Even a three-star alchemist was extremely grateful towards him, and addressed him as Grandmaster. From this, it could be seen how prestigious Ling Han was. However, it was easy for others to remember Ling Han. But for Ling Han to remember all these admirers in his heart, that was too difficult. Furthermore, he did not deliberately remember them. Back then, he had left after the Tao discussion, and did not use this chance to establish his own prestige. I am Sun Feng. This young man hurriedly introduced himself. That day, after listening to Grandmaster Ling's Tao discussion, I was filled with gratitude towards Grandmaster Ling. But I did not have the chance to express my respect to Grandmaster Ling. I did not think that this time, I would actually be able to come to Sun Soul Sea with Grandmaster Ling. It is truly my honor. Brother Sunday. Ling Han smiled faintly at the other. I dare not, I dare not. Sun Feng hurriedly said with incredible modesty, but there was also a hint of excitement in his tone. Being able to obtain the recognition of his idol made him too happy. This act is really well done. Ma Tongguang saw this, and could not help but sneer inwardly. Just now, he had just said that the actor he found was not important enough, and had not thought that a second one would immediately appear. Fine, you can continue acting. Grandmaster Ling. Grandmaster Ling. Grandmaster Ling. More and more people discovered Ling Han, and they all walked over, greeting Ling Han warmly. And those who could receive a nod from Ling Han all revealed expressions of excitement, appearing to be incredibly happy. In the beginning, there were only a dozen people, then a few dozen, then 100, then a few hundred. Ling Han was surrounded by a sea of people, and even Ma Tongguang and Lu Xianming were squeezed out. Damn, what's going on? Ma Tongguang was taken aback. Given the immortals' memories, they knew exactly how many people had boarded the spaceships. He was certain that none of them had come from the spaceships. It was easy to arrange one or two performers, but it was difficult to arrange hundreds or thousands of performers. Moreover, these people were all at the peak stage of the severing mundane tier. Ma Tongguang suddenly realized that he had underestimated Ling Han. This holy son of Alchemy City did not seem to be simple. Perhaps he had not underestimated Ling Han, but rather underestimated the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. Thus, he thought that the people that came from this place were lowly and useless, and that he would be able to subdue them as long as he revealed the slightest bit of his domineering aura. Reality proved that a place could always produce a few prodigies, and the individual prodigies were even more stunning. A ferocious glint flashed across his eyes. He liked to subdue prodigies, and the more arrogant they were, the more challenging they would be to him. However, when someone reached a status that could threaten him, he would no longer have any intention of subduing them. Instead, he would mercilessly eliminate them. Ling Han seemed to have this tendency. What caused Ma Tongguang to feel more and more uncomfortable was that more and more people came to greet Ling Han. In fact, there were not only 2-star alchemists, but even a few 3-star alchemists had come. All of them had white hair, and were suffering from the torment of the immortal's tribulation. If they did not break through to the dividing soul tier, their lifespan would be right before them. 3-star alchemist Ma Tongguang finally lost his composure. He was indeed a prodigy of alchemy. He had refined alchemical pills for less than 1 million years, and he had already become a 3-star alchemist. This was something that even many 4-star alchemists could not compare to. But he wanted 3-star alchemists to worship him? Sorry, this was completely impossible. Everyone's cultivation level was the same, so who would worship him? There was no such rule in the world of alchemy. If you were a greater prodigy, then they would worship you. Yet Ling Han had done it. This caused jealousy to rise in Ma Tongguang's heart, and his killing intent burned even brighter. Die, he thought, completely dispelling his plan of subduing Ling Han as his subordinate. He had to be eliminated, and he had to be eliminated as soon as possible, no matter the cost. Otherwise, when Ling Han went to the Western Celestial Realm, there might be a mighty figure of alchemy who came looking for Ling Han and took him as a disciple. At that time, it would be impossible to eliminate Ling Han. No one dared. Lu Xianming saw the change in Ma Tongguang's expression and smirked coldly in his heart. He had long since predicted that Ma Tongguang was only having wishful thinking. In the end, he would still have to fight with Ling Han, just like he had in the past. However, he had been too soft-hearted at that time, and did not kill him at the first instant. In the end, when he was about to make trouble, Ling Han's momentum had already formed, and it was too late. He hoped that Ma Tongguang would definitely not repeat his mistake this time. Ling Han became the center of attention. As long as there was an alchemist, they would come to pay respects to him. Even if there were some who did not attend the celebration at that time, they still heard others later on, and were similarly very grateful towards Ling Han. Furthermore, the news spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100, causing Ling Han's reputation to flourish. Thankfully, there were very few alchemists in the end, and those that just happened to be at the peak stage of the severing mundane tier were even rarer. A few days later, Ling Han had recovered his peace and quiet. "Brother Ling, you are more powerful than me," Yin Xianlu said sincerely. "At the time, though I was called the number 1 in the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, and countless people looked up to me, that was only limited to the calm peace heaven. However, Brother Ling, you have already spread to the whole Eastern Celestial Realm." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "It is just a coincidence. Niu's Ling Han is the most powerful." Hu Niu said joyfully as she wrapped her arms around Ling Han's arm. "Brother Ling is indeed powerful. However, the 3 capitals heavens can be ranked in the middle in the Eastern Celestial Realm, and there are countless prodigies there," Yin Xianlu said solemnly. "Their number 1 prodigy is called a madman. His name is Lu Heng, and he is a famous madman for his martial art. Once he starts fighting, he will not even acknowledge his friends. It is said that there is no one in the 3 capitals heavens who is not afraid of him." Ling Han couldn't help but become interested, and said, "Then I really have to see for myself." Yin Xianlu faltered at first, and then laughed in spite of himself. "I should have guessed long ago. Brother Ling is such a person." In truth, he was also such a person. However, when he made a trip to the wide prosperity heaven, he realized that he was a frog at the bottom of a well. Thus, He faced them as a competitor, and was no longer a high and mighty king, waiting for those below him to come and challenge him. Since he had nothing to do, Yan Xianlu began to talk about some of Lu Heng's glorious deeds. When Ling Han finished listening, he confirmed that Lu Heng's reputation as a madman was definitely not obtained randomly. He was indeed incredibly crazy. This was a monster who treated battle as a meal. Hey, have you guys heard? A person suddenly raised his voice. When a certain person said this, he would definitely be certain that the others did not know what he was about to say, so as to satisfy the vanity that everyone was following him. True enough, when everyone went over, that person showed a smug smile and said, "Latest news, the madman has just been defeated. Sorry, the second update has been delayed until now. I'm at the airport, so it's not convenient for me to write, and I don't have any drafts stored. I definitely won't make it in time for the third update today. I'll reach Pudong tomorrow morning, and once I get home, I'll sleep. Thus, tomorrow's update will at least be done in the evening. As for the chapters 10, let me slowly repay them. I'm really sorry. I've made everyone wait so long today. It's more refreshing to read on my phone." Chapter 1993. What? Madman was defeated? Immediately, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people revealed expressions of disbelief, thinking that it was just a rumor. Hee, it's not the first time Kuangren has been defeated. Someone shook his head. This madman dares to challenge even ascending origin tiers. Isn't it very normal for him to be defeated? Ha. Many people laughed out loud. To say nothing of challenging an ascending origin tier elite, even a severing mundane tier would suffer a crushing defeat against an immortal palace tier. Even if it was a fifth severance monarch tier like Ling Han, he would only be able to suppress Yin souls at most, and match Earth souls. There was absolutely no way that Heaven souls could win against them. However, how could any normal person challenge an ascending origin tier? Only a freak like the maniac would do such a thing. No. It wasn't an ascending origin tier that defeated the maniac. The person who had spread the news immediately shook his head. That's the immortal palace tier, someone said. Nope. The person who spread the news continued to shake his head. Heavenly soul. No. Everyone's laughter immediately died down. If this news was true, then it was indeed shocking. An Emperor Realm dividing soul expert? Someone guessed. A considerable number nodded in agreement. Though the Kuangren was the strongest in the severing mundane tier of the three capital heavens, king tiers would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him, as long as they advanced into the dividing soul tier. And emperor tiers would even be able to suppress him. After all, this was a suppression of a major tier. You've all guessed wrong. It wasn't a dividing soul tier that defeated the Kuangren either. Rather, it was a severing mundane tier cultivator. That person finally revealed an earth-shattering piece of news. Impossible. It must be a rumor. To think that I spent so much time guessing which expert Kuangren is going to challenge this time. It turns out that he was just spouting nonsense. Boring. At least 99% of the people shook their heads. None of them were willing to believe it. The Kuangren was the number one person in the severing mundane tier in the three capital heavens, and was equivalent to the number one person in the surrounding seven heavens regions. If one said that there was any severing mundane tier that could defeat him, wouldn't that be a joke? Could it be that the strongest severing mundane tier cultivator from the upper middle heaven, or even the upper heaven, had specially come to challenge the maniac person? The possibility of that happening was almost zero. It's true, the man cursed. I swear on my life that this news is true. The one who defeated the madman was a mysterious man called Nameless G. It's said that the battle between him and the madman was so intense that ghosts wailed and gods howled. The madman used everything he had, but he was still defeated and almost died. When he escaped, he only had half of his body left. Hearing him say this, more people laughed out loud. It was too funny. Even if someone could really defeat the madman, how could it be possible to force him to such a point? Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. Ji Wuming that was no ordinary fifth severance monarch tier, but rather a former celestial king, a ninth heaven celestial king. His methods couldn't be measured with common sense. He was so powerful that it caused others to feel despair, and most emperors could only look up to him. If Nameless Ji had defeated Quangren, then Ling Han wouldn't be surprised at all. Ma Tongguang scoffed and said, Ji Wuming Quangren, they are all frogs at the bottom of a well. In the Western Immortal region, which one of them can be called a genius? Ling Han glanced at him, shook his head, and didn't say anything. What was a frog at the bottom of a well? He was. Brother Ling, do you think I've said anything wrong? Ma Tongguang suddenly turned his target to Ling Han. Ridiculously wrong, Ling Han said calmly, not giving him any face at all. At first, he had wanted to be amiable with the other. But who asked this person to provoke him first? He wasn't Do. Oh, you can just need it as you like. Who are you? Brother Ling, are you not convinced? Ma Tongguang asked menacingly. It was time to let this frog at the bottom of a well know what it meant by there was always someone better out there. Boom! The Empress and Hunyo moved at the same time. Two snow-white palms clapped out, and the heaven and earth instantly lost color. Neither of the two of them followed the rules. How dare you? Ma Tongguang humphed coldly. These two women actually dared to move against him. Humph! Did they think that just because they were beautiful, everyone would yield to them and pamper them? But he immediately paled in fright, because the attacks of these two women were incredibly fierce, causing him to feel a huge pressure. He hurriedly moved with his full strength. Pung! A terrifying power swept over, and he was instantly sent flying, instantly turning into a small black dot. The Empress and Hunyo exchanged a look, and for the first time, they actually felt that the other was slightly pleasing to the eye. Meanwhile, Lu Xianming was dumbfounded. He had always believed in the strength of the Western celestial realm, and Ma Tongguang cultivated in both alchemy and martial arts. Not only was he a genius in alchemy, he was also a monarch tier in martial art. In a battle of equals, he should definitely be invincible. But these two women joined forces and sent him flying with a single move. This. How was he supposed to accept this? Ling Han smiled calmly. To Lu Xianming, this was like the sky had collapsed, but for him, it couldn't be any more normal. Ma Tongguang was indeed a monarch tier, but at most, he could only be on par with Yin Xianlu. Whether it was the Empress or Hunyo, they were slightly stronger than him. And when the two women joined forces, they were naturally even more frightening. Perhaps if it was Ling Han, he would also be sent flying with a single move. The difference was that Ling Han would be sent flying, but he definitely wouldn't be wounded. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to attack Lu Xianming either. He merely swept an indifferent glance over him, and then paid him no more attention. But this kind of indifference caused Lu Xianming to tremble all over. He was angered. No matter what, he was a 2-star alchemist, and becoming a 3-star alchemist in the future would be a piece of cake. It was just that becoming a 4-star alchemist would be a little difficult. But Ling Han actually didn't even bother to give him a second look, and directly caused him to suffer 10,000 points of damage. Damn it, damn it, damn it! The other person who was shouting detestable was Ma Tongguang. He crashed into a mountain peak before he could stop himself from flying backwards. After he pulled himself out of the mountain peak, he was so angry that his entire body was on fire. But he was also filled with fear. Though he had underestimated his opponent, though he had been attacked by the combined forces of two women, if it wasn't for the fact that the two women were absolutely powerful, how could they possibly have sent him flying with a single move? There was actually such a genius in the Eastern Celestial Realm. Ling Han was indeed a great enemy of his. Not only was this person's achievements in alchemy astonishing, he also had two powerful helpers by his side. Furthermore, he was shockingly beautiful, causing others to be envious. However, Ling Han's personal strength shouldn't be very high. Ma Tongguang was certain in his heart. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been the two women who had made a move just now, but Ling Han. In the Sun Soul Sea, as long as Ling Han was separated from the two women, it would be the time for him to make his move. Xu Yering is here, someone called out, and instantly attracted the gazes of countless people. Xu Yering, the #1 beauty of the wide prosperity heaven, and more so an invincible monarch tier. No matter where she went, she would become the center of attention. As her white dress fluttered, an exquisite beauty stepped through the air. Her black hair was like clouds, and she was elegant and otherworldly. Who else could it be but Xu Yaring? Her eyes swept over, and immediately locked onto Ling Han, revealing a menacing killing intent. Because there was a celestial king from the Rock Palace that stood up for Ling Han. The celestial king tier-level forces of the wide prosperity heaven didn't make trouble for Ling Han. It wasn't that they would let Ling Han off just like that, but rather that everyone acted according to the rules. Severing mundane tier against severing mundane tier, and dividing soul tier against dividing soul tier. They definitely wouldn't bully the weak. Of course, this would only happen between Celestial King tier-level forces that were similar in strength. Otherwise, if a junior of an ascending origin tier-level force killed someone, they would definitely be directly slaughtered by the Celestial King tier-level force. I'll first upload a chapter. I've just reached home, and I'll sleep. I'll wake up in the evening to continue writing. Everyone, don't wait for the new chapter today. Tomorrow, everything will slowly return to normal. Chapter 1994. Ma Tongguang had already walked back, though he didn't have the face to face Ling Han and the others. But when he saw Xu Yaring, his eyes involuntarily lit up. This woman was also very beautiful, and had a kind of domineering aura, like a supreme divine sword that had been unsheathed, causing one to involuntarily want to avoid her sharpness. This kind of aura was really too shocking, too moving. Ma Tongguang's heart beat wildly. He had only felt this kind of aura from those powerful figures, but now it appeared on a woman in the severing mundane tier. Unbelievable. Even more amazing was that this woman was clearly extremely displeased with Ling Han. The enemy of my enemy is my ally. He immediately walked over and said, I am Ma Tongguang, and I come from the Western Celestial Realm. I also know how to refine some alchemical pills, and now I am a 3-star alchemist. Impressive, right? Not only was he a prodigy of martial art from the Western Celestial Realm, but he was also a 3-star alchemist. With these two added together, the halo above his head became even more dazzling. Xu Yaring glanced at him, an obvious disdainful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She was a dignified celestial king, and had reached the height of 7th heaven at the time. She needed to take a measly severing mundane tier, or 3-star alchemist seriously, and those that could attract her attention were only true prodigies of martial art like Yi and Ling Han. Fuck off, she said coldly, her voice icy. Fuck. Ma Tongguang couldn't help but curse in his mind. Why are the people of the Eastern Celestial Realm all so arrogant? Did you not hear that I came from the Western Celestial Realm, and am also a 3-star alchemist? You are too arrogant. He attacked brazenly. Previously, he had suffered a great loss in front of everyone. And if he didn't quickly regain this face, how was he going to continue living? Furthermore, he had always considered himself a cultivator of the Western Celestial Realm, and showed a strong sense of superiority, so he couldn't just end things with his tail between his legs. Xu Yaring was already furious, and couldn't help but become even more furious. With a wave of her slender hand, she also used a celestial technique, and retaliated against Ma Tongguang. One Xu Yaring naturally couldn't compare to the combined might of Hunyou and the Empress, but she had been a celestial king in her last life, and was even stronger than ordinary monarch tiers. At the time, even Ling Han had only been on par with her in battle prowess. How could Ma Tongguang compare? He was indeed a monarch tier, and had also come from the stronger Western Celestial Realm. But there were naturally differences in strength among the monarch tiers of the Western Celestial Realm. At least, he could not be classified as the strongest in the Eastern Celestial Realm. He should only be on par with Yin Xianlu. This was extraordinary, but he had to fight against Xu Yaring, the reincarnated immortal king. No, in just 100 moves, Ma Tongguang had fallen into a disadvantageous position. After 500 moves, he began to show signs of defeat, and after 1,000 moves he was flustered. Seeing this scene, everyone was filled with disdain. If you don't have the strength, why are you pretending to be a wolf? Embarrassing. Even Lu Xianming's face was a little red. At the very least, he was still Ma Tongguang's subordinate. If his master lost face, it wouldn't be good for him either. For the sake of Su Huanxiang, I'll spare your life. Xu Yaring lightly rebuked, sending Ma Tongguang flying once more. But she didn't take advantage of the situation to pursue and finish him off. Instead, she coldly pulled back. Pung! Ma Tongguang fell heavily to the ground. He felt his chest boiling and his face burning. But he was even more shocked in his heart, because the Su Huanxiang that Xu Yaring spoke of was his ancestor. Su Huanxiang, a legendary figure of the Western celestial realm. She had used alchemy to cultivate, and was both a 5-star alchemist and a celestial king. Furthermore, she was a 4th heaven existence, and had hopes of breaking through to 5th heaven, 6th heaven, or even higher cultivation levels. But from Xu Yaring's tone, she not only knew Su Huanxiang, but even knew this celestial master. How was that possible? Even he had not seen his ancestor many times. So how did this measly severing mundane tear in the eastern celestial realm see her? Wasn't she boasting too much? But was there a need for her to lie to him at this time? You, who exactly are you? Ma Tongguang asked. Xu Yaring was disdainful to answer, and one word was written all over her face. You are not worthy. Ma Tongguang was very hurt, and could only walk to the side sullenly. Fuck, why were the women of the eastern celestial realm all so powerful? Get lost, you are blocking my way. Just when he had just sat down on a large rock, a voice traveled out from behind him. It was very cold and very arrogant, and there was even an indescribable arrogance in it. Ma Tongguang was displeased. I am sitting perfectly fine, so can't you go around if you want to pass by? Am I fuck you taking up a lot of space? You are seeking death. Ugh. Ma Tongguang had just said these words when he felt a grip around his neck. He had actually been lifted up by someone, and then his body felt light, and he was sent flying. In midair, he could only see a tall figure. It was like a tall mountain that rushed into his eyes, exuding endless dominance. Pung! Ma Tongguang was once again sent flying into the mountain, his limbs spread wide. He struggled free with an expression of shock, and spat out blood repeatedly. At first it was as black as ink, and then it was bright red, and finally it was golden. One move, it was only one move, and he had been severely wounded. Though he had indeed underestimated his opponent, no matter how much he underestimated his opponent, it could not conceal the massive gap in strength between the two of them. Heavens, was the eastern celestial realm going to defy the heavens? How could a random person that had come out be able to crush him? Xu Yaring's eyes narrowed, and she called out softly. The tall man turned around, revealing a boorish yet charismatic face. His black hair was loose, and he was a little slovenly, but this only added to his unrestrained charm. The number 1 prodigy of wide prosperity heaven, could even suppress the 2 reincarnated celestial kings, Xu Yaring and Tang Minglong. His strength was indescribable. What surprised Ling Han was that the other party's eyes were actually gold and silver, and they exuded a devilish charm. What, you want to sleep with me? He looked at Xu Yaring, and revealed an incomparably devilish smile. Xu Yaring's pretty face involuntarily tensed up. This man was unrestrained and unrestrained. He clearly had shocking talent in martial art, but he did not have the demeanor of a future martial grandmaster at all. You finally appeared, she said, and she glanced back at Ling Han. If he could also appear in the Three Flowers Valley, then even if he couldn't stop Ji Wuming, he could at least stop Ling Han and preserve some of wide prosperity heaven's strength. It wouldn't be like now, where almost all the emperors had died. Ha 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 ha. Why are there only so few people from wide prosperity heaven and calm peace heaven? A slender man appeared. He was dressed in green, and had a handsome face. How weak. Is there still a need for these 2 heavens to exist? Why don't they merge into our 3 capitals heavens? Another man appeared. His body was covered in fur, and he wasn't wearing any clothes. Instead, he was covered in chains. In any case, he had a lot of fur, so there was no need to worry about exposing himself. Wide prosperity heaven had only risen to prominence 100 million years ago. This was a very short period of time in the immortal realms. The majority of the geniuses were still growing, and were far from becoming famous. So in the eyes of the other heavens, these 2 heavens were the same as Shiyun Tian, incomparably weak. It was the same now. The other heavens were filled with geniuses, but the number of emperors in wide prosperity heaven and calm peace heaven could be counted on one hand. A devilish smile appeared on Yi's face as he walked towards the two men. You two scum, do you want to die? Currently in the process of writing. Update time is uncertain, so there's no need to wait. Sorry again. Chapter 1996. This was a madman, and also a madman whose strength could make others collapse. Even if Yin Xianlu were to face Yi, he would probably be killed in 3 to 5 moves. The so-called nature-defying freak referred to this kind of freak. He charged over, his gold and silver eyes pulsing with patterns of great Tao, like a demon god that could destroy the heavens and earth. Behind him, regulations turned into endless karmic fire, enveloping the whole sky. Eyes of destruction. Hunyo's expression was solemn. This was an extremely rare expression on her. Ling Han also showed a solemn expression. Being able to make Hunyo so cautious, this he was definitely not simple. However, though he had doubts in his heart, his people had already charged over. This kind of opponent was extremely rare. Ling Han met it with a punch, and exchanged a blow with Yi. Endless regulations collided and shattered, extremely brilliant. Under everyone's gazes, they saw that Ling Han and Yi were separated by 30 meters, both of them maintaining their punching posture. They clearly hadn't come into contact with each other, yet the power of regulation rippled between their fists, making it impossible for either of them to advance any further. Were they evenly matched, or were they temporarily locked in a stalemate? Hey! Both of them roared at the same time, and both burst forth with even stronger battle prowess. They sent each other flying. Xiao xiao. The two of them flew back 30 meters at the same time, and then immediately steadied their feet, stepping into the void. They really were evenly matched. Hiss! This, how is this possible? Even Luo Shenyuan and Sherbin were defeated, so this Yi's strength is definitely incredibly terrifying. But this person can actually fight Yi to a stalemate. That person came from the calm peace heaven, and his name is Ling Han. Furthermore, he is also an alchemist. It is said that he has given lectures, and is regarded as a grandmaster by countless alchemists. What? An alchemist can actually rival the emperor of martial art? I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. Is this calm peace heaven and wide prosperity heaven going to make a counterattack? Two world-shaking geniuses actually appeared at the same time. And that mysterious Ji Wuming, it is said that he also came from the calm peace heaven and wide prosperity heaven. Everyone clasped their heads and exclaimed in shock. The calm peace heaven, broad prosperity heaven, and cloud release heaven had been weak for a long time. This was something that was publicly acknowledged, and it had already become a kind of habit. Now, however, people like Ling Han and Yi had suddenly appeared, and this had completely overturned this habit. How were they supposed to adapt? Good. Ling Han laughed heartily, and his fists turned into raindrops that rained down on Yi. His eyes were also shining, a sign that his battle intent was burning fiercely. Interesting. An evil smile appeared on the corner of Yi's mouth. With a wave of his hands, they turned into gold and silver. The Grand Tao was at his fingertips, and its power was boundless. Bam! After this confrontation, Ling Han was blasted away and turned into a meteor. He lost. Ling Han lost. I knew it. How could a small region like Calm Peace Heaven produce two super prodigies in a row? That's more reasonable. Everyone nodded. This was in line with their understanding. However, in the next moment, their eyes immediately widened, and they were shocked to the extreme. That was because Ling Han stabilized his figure with a flip, and then charged back with 10 times his aura, similarly sending Yi flying with a punch. He was not to be outdone, and immediately stopped in his tracks, returning Ling Han's greeting. Pung pung pung. The two great prodigies clashed, the scene incredibly intense. This was a clash of Grand Tao, and also a clash of the Taoists that two young people had cultivated. Both wanted to suppress the other, and become the strongest. They were both fifth severance, and had cultivated the fifth severance to the point that they could no longer advance, so their battle prowess was naturally infinitely terrifying. Furthermore, this was under the condition that they had not used their trump cards. For example, Ling Han did not use the Nine Heavens Flame, Xianin Source Water, or the power of the Black Tower, or the power of the Divine Fetus. He only fought fiercely with his own strength. Xiao xiao xiao. Their figures were as fast as lightning. Even Fourth Severance Emperor Tears could not capture their trajectory, and could only judge from the remnant Tao of their battle. Too strong, too strong. Everyone's scalps went numb, and they felt a kind of chill all over their bodies. There was actually such a powerful severing mundane tear in this world, and it was not just one, but two. Moreover, these two freaks had both come from small places like the wide prosperity heaven and the calm peace heaven. Inconceivable, unacceptable. Even Xu Yaring's spirit was seized. She had been a seventh heaven celestial king in her last life, and her judgment was brilliant, and her horizons were extraordinarily high. People like Ma Tongguang were not even qualified to make her take a second look. But now, she had to admit that she was far from this strong when she was young. Even if she had reincarnated now, and had the experience of a celestial king as a foundation, her battle prowess was still inferior to these two young people. Unless she used her trump card, then there was only a possibility that she could kill these two young people. She couldn't help but think of Ji Wuming. When that lord was young, he was already this kind of existence that caused all the monarch tears of the world to despair. Being born in the same era as him was practically a kind of tragedy, and they would be completely outclassed by him. Now that that lord had reincarnated, and it was done intentionally, it had to become stronger. Thus, this lord should be able to firmly suppress Ling Han and Yi. In fact, even if the two of them joined forces, they would not be a match for him. Her gaze involuntarily became firm. That lord possessed great wisdom, great determination, and great decisiveness. He actually gave up his ninth heaven celestial king body and reincarnated to cultivate again. Since that was the case, he definitely had absolute confidence. He was truly invincible among his peers, the most powerful monarch tier. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han laughed loudly and threw out punch after punch. He felt completely satisfied, as if something was about to break out of his body, yet he kept feeling as if something was missing, unable to materialize. You can break through to the Yang Soul tier at any time, but you must first capture the soul embryo and divide a portion of your spirit before you can continue, Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded. The so-called dividing soul tier was to divide one's own spirit. There were 4 tiers of the dividing soul tier, so one had to divide it 4 times. And this was not something that one could divide just because they wanted to. They needed to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Thus, if one wanted to break through to the Yang Soul tier, they had to enter the Yang Soul Sea. Peng. The 2 great monarch tiers exchanged another blow, and were both sent flying back, putting a distance of almost 300 meters between them. You are qualified to be my friend. He did not attack again, and instead nodded at Ling Han, revealing an expression of affirmation. Ling Han smiled and said, "Are you sure that I also want to be your friend? I believe that you are the same kind of person as me." He grinned, incomparably demonic. Ling Han had to admit, though this person was crazy, he was filled with charisma. He was also not a person who would beat around the bush, so he immediately nodded, and said with a smile, "I am called Ling Han." The two of them looked at each other, and laughed loudly at the same time. Their expressions were extremely joyous, as if they had already been best friends for many years. Just as he finished writing, he checked that he had uploaded it, and then continued writing. Because he did not have any manuscripts, he could only write 1 chapter at a time. Chapter 1997. Both of them were definitely battle maniacs, and now they'd become friends after fighting, but he was definitely not the kind of enthusiastic person. After waving goodbye to Ling Han, he sat down at the side, like an ancient rock. Though he'd quietened down, no one dared to approach, fearing that he'd go berserk again. Ling Han walked back to Hunyo and the others and said, "What the hell is this double eyes destroy the world?" According to legend, In every chaotic world, a person with gold and silver eyes would appear, controlling the void with his left hand and time with his right. He would either bring order out of chaos or completely bury this chaotic world, Hunyo said. Ling Han was surprised and said, in other words, this kind of person could innately control the power of time and space. That should be the case. Hunyo nodded, but then spread her hands. Nyo isn't very clear either. They all popped out inexplicably, making Nyo very vexed. Bewitching Maiden Ro looked at Hunyo enviously. Those were inherited memories. Possessing the memories of an ascending origin tier, or even a celestial king, was equivalent to possessing the supreme mark of a great elite. Cultivating was practically like flying, and there would basically be no barrier to cultivation. Even better was that one could enjoy the comprehension of a great elite's martial art, but one could maintain their independence and integrity. This was the best part. For example, some people had a fortuitous encounter and obtained the memories left behind by a great elite, which also had the mark of martial art, but also the experiences of that great elite's lifetime. That endless experience surged over, and it was very easy to confuse people, unable to distinguish who these memories belonged to. Then, there could be a situation where a great change in temperament could occur. Ling Han glanced at Yi again. Previously, in the fierce battle, the other hadn't used the regulations of space and time. Obviously, he hadn't been in his strongest battle state just now. A smile tugged at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He too hadn't gone all out, and hadn't used any of his trump cards. Hopefully, they could battle again very soon, and it would be a battle with all their strength, so they could fight to their heart's content. On the other side, Ma Tongguang's eyes were blank, and his legs were trembling. At first, he wanted to find a chance to kill Ling Han after entering the Yangtze Sea, but after the battle between Ling Han and Yi, he naturally gave up on this idea. Who's gonna kill who? Putting aside the fact that Ling Han might not be separated from Hunyo and the Empress, even if they were separated, could he defeat Ling Han? That's courting death. He couldn't help but be dazed, and his expression was lifeless. He was an expert in both alchemy and martial arts. Even in the talented Western celestial realm, there were not many people who could compare to him. However, when he came to the Eastern celestial realm, the first person he met had already surpassed him. In terms of martial art, he was stronger than him, and in terms of alchemy, he had not even become a 4-star alchemist, yet he was already respectfully addressed as Grandmaster. From this, it could be seen just how talented he was in alchemy. This made him feel extremely disappointed, but also overflowing with killing intent. If he didn't get rid of Ling Han, he wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Even if he couldn't kill him now, it didn't matter. He could kill him when he returned to the Western celestial domain. That was his territory. What? The strongest monarch tier was so powerful that even heaven's souls might not be able to kill him? It didn't matter. Did the Western celestial realm lack immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier elites? He only had to offer enough conditions, and it was guaranteed that there would be someone who would kill Ling Han for him. Endure. Now he just had to wait for the opening of Yangtze Sea. When he broke through to Yangtze tier, he could return to the Western celestial realm. At that time, Ling Han would be in his grasp. I won't toy with you to death. Ling Han swept a glance over him from afar, smirking coldly in his mind. He should deal with this person to prevent him from jumping around and causing trouble. An extremely uncomfortable feeling suddenly rose up in him, and he walked in a certain direction. At the same time, the Empress and Hunyo stood up almost at the same time, and on the other side, he suddenly opened his eyes. A flash of golden light and a flash of silver light shot out, as if they could reach the ends of the celestial realm. My lord! Xu Yering leaped out and knelt down on one knee, incredibly respectful. A man in fluttering white robes appeared. His expression was incredibly elegant, otherworldly and refined. Ji Wuming. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly. The present Ji Wuming was much stronger than before, and he was completely unable to fathom him. Yi's strength was ostentatious, like a ball of blazing flames that wanted to burn the heavens and the earth. But Ji Wuming was reserved. At first glance, there was nothing special about him, but with a few more glances, one would feel more and more how terrifying he was. He was like a great ocean, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. No one knew how strong he was, or how strong he could be. Ji Wuming smiled faintly at Xu Yaring and raised a hand. Only then did Xu Yaring stand up and respectfully stand behind him like a maid. No, more accurately speaking, it should be said that she was a guard of his, like a soldier protecting his commander. But a mighty celestial king actually became a guard. If there was any battle that needed to be fought, celestial kings would participate in large numbers. And even seventh heaven celestial kings could only be reduced to soldiers. Ji Wuming's eyes looked over, and first stopped on Ling Han for a while. Then he looked at Yi, and especially when he discovered Yi's gold and silver eyes. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a smile. This was like a hunter staring at his prey. On Ling Han's body, there was a treasure that Ji Wuming needed, and on Yi's body, there was a bloodline that Ji Wuming needed. Ji Wuming wanted to subdue both of them. "I'm very unhappy that you're treating me like this," Yi said, directly provoking Ji Wuming. "So what?" Ji Wuming laughed. "I'll crush you." Yi's figure flashed, and the boulder he was sitting on disappeared, leaving behind only an afterimage. He had already appeared in front of Ji Wuming, punching out. Ji Wuming casually struck out, aiming for Yi's meridians. All of this seemed to be extremely slow, but it actually arrived before Yi's fist, even though it was launched later. The power of time. He let out a low groan of surprise, and then he laughed coldly. "Do you think that you're the only one who has grasped the power of time?" His golden eyes shone with a brilliant light, and countless stars were born within them, only to instantly explode and die. His entire body seemed to transform into an illusory image. He was clearly standing there, but he didn't seem to belong to this space-time. Xiao xiao xiao. One E after another appeared, and in the blink of an eye, over 10 of them had appeared. All of them punched out at Ji Wuming. "You've extracted your past and future selves and combined them in the present," Ji Wuming said with some interest. "As expected, someone with the eyes of destruction isn't simple. You've even grasped such a forbidden power. One is already terrifying enough, but a dozen of them? Furthermore, every single one of them is my true self. But apart from the present self, the other true selves don't belong to this space-time, so I can't kill them. There's practically no way to deal with this." Ji Wuming seemed to be explaining that there was no way to deal with this, but he didn't seem troubled at all. Instead, he pointed out with a finger. Boom! The entire world trembled, and everything disappeared. All that was left was this finger that tore through the heavens and the earth. It was like it had split the heavens and split the earth, bringing with it the ancient vicissitudes of life. Your power of time is indeed powerful, and there's practically no way to deal with it. But my finger can split the heavens and split the earth, creating a world. First, there must be a world. Only then can the natural laws be formed. In that case, my finger has completely suppressed the power of time. Boom! With a single tap of his finger, the dozen or so Yi's figures all flickered, and then disappeared. Only one remained. Come, let's continue. Chapter 1998. Ling Han's pupils involuntarily constricted. Ji Wuming had indeed become stronger again. And it was not just a little bit stronger. If he were to fight with his opponent now, it was more likely that he would be at a disadvantage. He was only at a disadvantage, however, with his powerful physique and monstrous recovery speed. As long as he continued fighting, the one who would have the last laugh would definitely be him, and not Ji Wuming. He stared blankly for a moment before his gold and silver eyes shone brightly, turning into 2 miniature suns. His battle intent surged like a song as he charged toward Ji Wuming again. This time, he raised his hands and slashed out countless air blades. He controlled time with one hand and space with the other. Ji Wuming's expression didn't change at all. He was still as calm and composed as ever. He pointed out with his finger, using the principle of not changing to deal with the myriad changes. Boom! A finger pressed down, and the air blades were all shattered. What a decent immortal fetus energy. I'll take it. Ji Wuming roared and finally took the initiative to attack, suppressing Yi. With his full strength, He immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. What? Everyone's hair stood on end, and their scalps went numb. Everyone knew how strong he was. He had consecutively defeated Luo Xunyuan and Shi Bin, two great emperors. However, after exchanging a few blows with Ji Wuming, he was already at a disadvantage. With such a comparison, one could see how monstrous Ji Wuming was. Could it be true that Quangren lost to nameless Ji? That's possible. He's too strong. How can there be such a terrifying monster in the world? Everyone hugged their heads and cried out in surprise. This had once again refreshed their understanding of geniuses. It turned out that some people could be so powerful that even peak-level emperors could only feel despair. Only Xu Yaring's expression was filled with pride. This lord had been a ninth heaven celestial king in the past. And in order to become a ninth heaven celestial king, just how powerful had he been in the severing mundane tier? It could be said very objectively that even though Ling Han and Yi were extremely powerful now, they would definitely become immortal kings in the future. But in the end, how many levels of heaven they would be able to reach was still a question mark. They might reach the fourth or fifth heaven, or they might reach the seventh or eighth heaven, but it was incredibly difficult to become a ninth heaven celestial king. It could be said that Ji Wuming had possessed battle prowess similar to that of Ling Han and Yi when he had been in the severing mundane tier in his last life. However, the crux of the matter was that Ji Wuming had chosen to reincarnate and use the experience of a celestial king to complete the severing mundane tier all over again. Just what kind of heights could he reach then? No one knew, and no one could imagine. The stronger the opponent, the more tenacious he would be, and the more astonishing his combat prowess would be. He was at a disadvantage, but Ji Wuming would not be able to defeat him in a short period of time. Hung Long Long, the Sun Soul Sea, or rather the small lake, suddenly began to boil, as if it was boiling water. Moreover, the water was originally dark blue, but now, it revealed a seven-colored light. The Sun Soul Sea has opened. Someone shouted. This was no secret. At least half of the people here had been here before. However, some of them had not broken through the first time. Some had not broken through the second or third time. And some had not broken through even after hundreds or thousands of times. Boom Ji Wuming and Yi directly fought their way into the sea. Even if they had instantly gone several hundred miles deep, there would occasionally be a shockwave from their battle surging out from the bottom of the sea, and it was extremely destructive to Emperor Tears. Let's go! Ling Han wanted to continue the battle between Ji Wuming and Yi, and he had also heard Ma Tongguang say that the person who entered this place first would obtain a greater reward. He pulled the few women with him, and leaped into the Sun Soul Sea. Beside him, Yin Xianlu also leaped. Behind him was Ma Tongguang, and after a slight hesitation, he also leaped in. Lu Xianming immediately followed. He had also heard Ma Tongguang's words. Those who entered this place first might obtain even more gifts from the heaven and earth. Though this was called a sea, in truth, it was pitifully small. However, after descending for close to 500 miles, this passageway became wider. Ling Han discovered that he did not have to exert any strength at all. There was an undercurrent that was carrying him downwards. If he did not exert any strength to resist, it would cause their speed to become faster and faster. If a sturdy object of 3-star pseudo-divine metal or above suddenly appeared below them, then even if the majority of them had pushed their defenses to the limit, they would immediately be smashed into smithereens. He spread out his large hand and grabbed all three women. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden had naturally entered into the Black Tower long ago. She had not even broken through to the severing mundane tier, so there was not the slightest bit of meaning for her to take the risk here. Another 3 days later, there was a crashing sound, and then there was another splash. They had actually fallen into a great sea. This was really a great sea, vast and boundless, and above their heads was a waterfall that was endlessly crashing down with people. The entrance to this Sun Soul Sea was actually a waterfall. It was unimaginable. A waterfall that was who knew how many millions and millions of miles long was actually connected to an incredibly colossal underground space. The heaven and earth were indeed the greatest creator. Ling Han and the three women all channeled their cultivation techniques. and stepped on the surface of the sea. However, they could not increase their height any further, because the moment their feet left the surface of the water, there would be a frightening pressure assaulting them, forcing them to fall into the water. This is the Sun Soul Sea. Ling Han looked into the distance and saw that a great many people had already gone out to sea, stepping on the surface of the water and sprinting all the way. In an instant they had completely disappeared. However, Yi and Ji Wuming had both disappeared. It was unknown whether they had fought somewhere very far away, or had temporarily stopped fighting and gone their separate ways. In the distant sky, a rainbow hung like an arch bridge. There was no source of light here, but it was incredibly bright. To break through to Yang Soul, it was actually very simple. One just had to hunt and kill living creatures in this great sea. The aquatic creatures here would all produce something called Sun Soul Stones, and Sun Soul Stones could house a subsoul. When it broke out of its shell, it would become a Yang Soul. Sun Soul Stones were divided by purity and size. Of course, the bigger and purer the better. And if one wanted to house a subsoul, then there was a requirement for the size and purity of the Sun Soul Stone. It was not something that could be used just by obtaining a piece of Sun Soul Stone. But what if it wasn't big enough and not pure enough? No problem. One could refine it themselves, refining a few small pieces of Sun Soul Stones into one big piece, removing the impurities and turning it into a rare treasure. Of course, the refined one definitely couldn't compare to naturally formed ones. Another point was that Sun Soul Stones could not leave the Sun Soul Sea, so don't even think of letting others bring them out. Moreover, it was useless to bring them out. The incubation of Yang Soul also required the special environment of the Sun Soul Sea. Come, let's start hunting. The four set out, walking towards the depths of the great sea. There were living creatures everywhere in the sea, so there was no need to run to a specific place. They could naturally go wherever they wanted. In a short while the color of the sea suddenly changed. It was originally dark blue, but now it became purple. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't that the seawater had changed color, but rather that a large school of fish had arrived. These fish were very strange. They had long noses like an elephant's, and their scales were very thick, like the skin of an alligator. Nio come! Hunyo charged out. Pung! A punch shot out, and instantly water splashed everywhere, and a huge hole instantly appeared on the surface of the sea. The fish were startled, and all turned around to swim downstream. In that instant, the purple seawater immediately changed back to dark blue, and Hunyo's attack was actually a waste of effort. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.